Okay, we're live. It sucks. I hate live stream. I hate it. Girly, please don't bark. Wouldn't it figure? Wouldn't it figure? Anyway, folks, apart from annoying and horrible things that caused me to be 20 minutes late, sorry about that. It is more important that the data that I'm about to give you is in the right order and sequence than that it is on time. So I do apologize in the interest of posterity. It's definitely worth it. I do apologize once again. Okay, so we're going to call this part 7, back to the slide, of the global very acrimonious divorce, in which we now will all agree things definitely did not go as we expected. There were many things that back to the camera, many things that we said in the last video that I was hoping would take place, and they did not take place. And I am in this just like you guys, okay? I don't have any special access above very small, limited briefings I get, little text messages and stuff. And there's not a whole lot going on that I know that's different than you. What I do have, however, is a pretty good idea of where this is going and what the ultimate objective is. So please, let me just start out by saying that this is not the end of the road. And if you're thinking that it's all over and you're thinking that this is an unrecoverable situation, or that we're not going to get anything that we want out of this, that it's all negative and it's all bad and oh my God, you don't need to be freaked out. As always, I advocate for no violence. I advocate for no armed protesting of any kind. That is not what we need to do. And it's very interesting that certain others in this community who are talking about these types of subjects on the alternative side of things have come up with similar statements recently. In other words, everyone is being told, please do not get involved. Please do not try to take the law into your own hands, and respect that this process is not what it seems to be. There are some very strange things going on here. So back to the slides. I want to talk about some of the anomalies around this inauguration before we really get into the details of what the heck is going on here that I want to share with you. So this was the former Powell account on the particular app we've spoken about before. Ends in Graham, as you've heard, and the beginning is Tella. So I'm not going to say it all at once for obvious reasons. And again, please don't hate on me for using code. It's very important that I do that, because the only way they really know what you got is by looking at the transcript, which is automatically done off of your audio. So there's going to be a lot of missing words here, okay? So it says, confirmed, President T will not welcome China J to the WH on Wednesday. And so this was the first sign that, okay, there's some real acrimonious feelings there, and that's pretty obvious that would happen. Here's another one, and this was one of the first telegraphing signs that we might not be getting what we wanted out of this whole thing. This was from Dr. Gina on Rav, I guess. I'm not sure who that is, but I wanted to take a picture of it because it was important. She said, just hung up the phone with the president. I'll talk about it a little more in my show tomorrow night. This country will wake up to realize a devastating loss on Wednesday. That was the first sign that, like, whoa, maybe we're not going to get this whole thing with the type of experiences that we wanted to have, the type of positivity that we wanted to have, which maybe isn't positive. You know, not everybody's going to look at it that way. The things that I was telling you to expect are going to happen, but I believe now that we're going to have to wait a little longer. And so, okay, if you are so upset about what's going on that you can't wait whatever it's going to be, 30 days, a few more months, there's a couple different threads of how long this is going to last, please do not expect disaster. Worrying is praying for what you don't want. And I see a lot of that going on. Please bear in mind that if you are an influencer, if you have an audience of a lot of people listening to you, or even a smaller audience, it doesn't really matter. When we talk about possible futures, we are imagineering. We are giving people thought forms which their minds start to put manifestation towards. Sometimes you call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, but there's more to it than that. Our thoughts are powerful, our thoughts are creative forces, and our thoughts make reality. And I've argued for this point in many, many of my books and scientific works over the years, going back 25 years now. Consciousness science is one of my big things. So I think it's a very, very important point to get started, that even if you think that it's not going to go very well, or you think that this is not going to lead to anything positive, and you feel convinced of that, why would you want to put more information out there that's going to cause our fellow co-creators, our fellow ascended or ascending beings, because we're all in the process of the ascension, as it's called. That's been one of my other big things, right? That we're moving into some new zone of energy in the galaxy, and I've got all the science to show that. I've got all the science to show that climate change is actually interplanetary, that it's not just happening to the Earth, but it's happening to Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the Sun, the space in between the planets. All of them collectively are becoming brighter, hotter, and more magnetically charged. You're actually seeing brightness increases. Even the Earth is doing it. Plenty of examples of this. High increases in temperature, magnetic fields, all this stuff across the entire solar system. And honestly, one of the most bizarre cover-ups that we have encountered is the fact that no one ever talks about this, despite the work that I've done going back now since 2004, really, of digging out this climate change data from NASA science. I have spent most of my career validating the Christian prophecies without even realizing that what I was really doing was Christian. I'd come across this idea of an ascension event in a variety of different works that claimed to have come from extraterrestrial intelligence. So I said to myself, if there is some validity to the idea of a massive, discontinuous, dimensional shift type of event in our solar system, if that really is what's going to happen, and it really does seem to change the very nature of reality itself, the nature of what it means to be a human being, the nature of consciousness, the nature of time, the speed that time flows, all of those things apparently change. The actual brightness output of the sun all seems to transform in the midst of an event that I have now tracked down in so many different ancient prophecies, which we call the solar flash. This is the idea that the sun gives off some sort of big flash of white light. It engulfs the entire solar system. It's going to be bright whether you're on the side of the Earth facing the sun or the side of the Earth that does not face the sun. It also appears that there's a massive amount of solar particle emissions that hit our atmosphere and cause incredible rainbow-colored aurora borealis to form in the sky. And there's a Hindu prophecy that talks about these rainbow-colored clouds at the moment that this happens. Now, the Hindus actually even had a word for it, for the solar flash. They called it the Samavartika fire, or Samvarta fire. Another term for it is Yuga fire. And in my other works, I've shown that this is extensively discussed. Whoever was in the ancient Hindu culture appears to have been from other worlds, and this is why Krishna is pictured having blue skin, and why there are other types of beings that have different appearances, including one type that are in some of the Hindu illustrations, where it appears that there's faces all across the head. And apparently there are certain types of very advanced beings, like there's Mahadeva is one of the ones that shows up in the Hindu scriptures, in which these beings look at you in the eye regardless of where you're standing around them in a 360-degree circle. And there are references made in the Hindu scriptures to the fact that the god or goddess, I forget which one it is right now, Mahadeva, glows with the same type of resplendent light that you would see in the Samvarta fire at the end of an age. they talk about it like everybody knows this is what the sun does, or any sun does, that there's a solar flash. So it also appears in Zoroastrianism, which is the offshoot of Hindu culture that went into Iran instead of India. And in Zoroastrianism, they call it the Frasho Kareti. Now, in that case, they don't actually say that the sun gives off a big bright flash, although they do in Hinduism. In the Zoroastrian culture, they talk about the idea that there is a white light, or something like a white molten metal, white hot, that comes down through the mountains, and that the people who are ready to handle this thing will be transformed by it, and that it's only the equivalent of having a bath in warm milk, which I guess back then was considered a good thing. First of all, why would you want to try to get that much milk to begin with to take a bath in? I don't know. I never understood that one. But supposedly it's like a bath in warm milk if you're ascending, but if you're not ascending, that it will actually consume you. So I really do, now that we're having a lot of people in the Christian community listen to me, and we're getting new audiences because of this socio-political content and commentary that I'm giving you, I would like to be very clear about the fact that I didn't come into this having any particular interest in Christianity. I actually did not. I got kind of tricked into it by studying the idea of what Christians would call the rapture. Come to find out that it's not just Christianity that's prophesizing this. It's Islam. There's beautiful, beautiful, many prophecies of it in the Quran. It's all over the place in Hinduism, hundreds of references to the solar flash, Zoroastrianism, and then there's a whole long laundry list of ancient traditions that have predicted this, and those ancient traditions appear to have been inspired or directly given to us by human-looking extraterrestrial beings that might appear indistinguishable from you and me, but there's something strange if they're levitating, and if they have a glow coming off of their bodies, and if they telepathically communicate with you, and if they can levitate things with their mind, or form objects out of thin air, or bilocate themselves, or teleport from one place to another. This is all normal stuff that we see worldwide in all these ancient prophecies. Now, let's go back to the main camera for a second. I'm not working off of any notes right now, but I want to just give you an overview of some of this ascension content. I didn't come into this thinking that Christianity was going to be solving problems for me. I came into this with the idea that, hey, why do all these different ancient cultures tell us the same prophecy? And there has to, in my mind, be some sort of unified explanation for why they're all saying this. So let's just be clear that my own religious, if you will, or it's not really religious, it's a spiritual viewpoint, combined with all these different religions that say the same thing, my spiritual viewpoint is that we are going to be fine. That regardless of what the hologram of third-dimensional reality is showing you right now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter, even if it looks like the planet is really, really going down the tubes, more than what we've already seen. Why do I say it doesn't matter? That might seem to be a very facile and even disingenuous opinion. I'm saying that because we are going to get where we need to go. This ascension process only has to do with one thing. It has to do with how loving you are towards other people and yourself. And if you're only loving towards yourself and you're not loving towards other people, you're definitely not going to be ascending. So the various spiritual sources that I've looked at and put together, which includes ancient spiritual transmissions that are now called religions, and modern ones as well, of which I have a very, very high standard of what I will accept as factual, and it has to have a great deal of evidentiary support. I have those sources, and I've been putting them out in books for the last 25 years. No one can dispute this. No one can dispute how long I've been doing this, and that I have put together just an incredible body of intellectual property and long-term data. I didn't originally start talking about any of this other stuff having to do with socio-political things until 2007, when I first began exposing the cabal, deep state, whatever you want to call it. That began at that time, and has continued ever since. They do serve a purpose. It's not like we have some horrible thing that's going on planet Earth that has no other purpose except to make us angry and to torture and kill people. That is not true. These beings, these people, these organizations and how they collude with each other, this has all been authorized. And what I have really presented in the fullness of my work is the idea that we live in a spiritually managed reality. People who are not switched on to spirituality won't necessarily want to believe that there could be a greater intrinsic structure to life on Earth. Most people tend to think that we live in a random universe. Let's go over to this one now. A random universe, a random reality, in which if you could steal from somebody and not get caught, you get away with it and everything's fine. And nothing's going to happen to you. As long as you don't get physically caught, you're okay. However, certain events start to crack open the eggshell of the wall that we build around our hearts. And that's kind of like mixing metaphors madly. I'm sorry about that. But cracking the wall around our hearts, cracking that shell. When that shell around your heart starts to crack, you're going to start to notice things. You're going to start to notice what I call synchronicity. Synchronicity is a strange causal relationship between two seemingly disconnected things. And what do I mean by causal relationship? I mean, I'll give you my own example. When I started to get into this research very heavily, this was after I got myself off of alcohol and drugs in 1992. And in 1993, I began doing hardcore research after finding out that UFOs were real and they have been covered up. And I found this out from a first-hand source who got it from the head of the physics department. And this professor, I never actually spoke with him about this in person, but I got a very detailed briefing on the 2-hour conversation that my friend had with this professor, in which he openly acknowledged that War of the Worlds was used to make people afraid of UFOs, to make people afraid. This was an alleged radio broadcast that wasn't actually true, but it was purporting to be talking about an alien invasion. Apparently, people panicked and were stuffing wet towels in their chimneys and doing all kinds of silly things. There is now academic dispute over whether that was true, but no matter what, it was a very alarming show if you believed that it was real, because it was implying that extraterrestrial ships had come here and were just zapping large amounts of land, and it was all intercut between apparent radio broadcasts of music. So you'd hear a little bit of classical music, and then the guy cuts in again, Orson Welles, and he's telling you these horrible things that have happened, and people believed it. So to learn that War of the Worlds was used as a wedge to stop the public from wanting to ask questions, now that you're seeing the level of corruption that can actually exist, that these types of events that we've now seen over the last year can happen on planet Earth in this country, maybe it isn't so hard to understand that other things have been covered up. The real secret to the UFO phenomenon, in my opinion, is human extraterrestrials. We have gotten very much sidetracked by expecting or anticipating that extraterrestrials are all bug-eyed grays with huge bald heads, whitish skin, and spindly little bodies. When you really get into accurate UFO reports, contactee reports, insiders who I've spoken to, who claim to be working at the cosmic top secret level, which is allegedly 35 levels of need to know above the President of the United States. And believe me, we still have active contact with people who have this clearance. And some of those insiders have never, ever been seen by you, by the way. I'm still talking to people who have never been seen. And we're still putting together new information. There's a lot more to know than anything that's been disclosed so far. I have built those insider contacts over the course of really about 25 years again. And there is something undeniable about sitting down with a person who's been through this, who has actually worked in the secret world, the classified world, where they have actually worked face-to-face with extraterrestrials. They've interacted with them on the job site. They have taken all this almost as a matter of course. It becomes apparently a boring, ordinary thing to hang out with extraterrestrial humans and work a job in a deep underground military base or off-planet. This happens constantly. There's tons and tons of people from Earth who are working with extraterrestrials right now, if you believe what these people are telling me. Now, I've had all manner of different responses to this, but the confirmations continue to come in from very high-level sources. The real issue seems to be that people have a difficulty with appreciating what's going on and the enormity to which we've been lied to. Because the world that these insiders have shared with me is a world in which extraterrestrials are commonly interacting with our military-industrial complex and have been since at least the 1940s. And then I've heard that every U.S. president, at least I'd heard this as of 2010, that every U.S. president since George Washington has had in-person interaction to some degree or another with these human extraterrestrials. And when I pressed for details, I was told that in certain cases, these beings will actually just have an apport. They just appear like in the Oval Office in the White House. And here's this being that just shows up out of nowhere and is standing there talking to you. And if that doesn't surprise you, then the fact that he's telepathic and he can read your mind and he can tell you things before you say them and he knows things about you that nobody should know, that's the kind of validation that these presidents were getting. So there's so many things I could talk about regarding human extraterrestrials, but the point that I want to make with you is that we can link them to ancient spiritual teachings that have been codified into religion. What do I mean by that? I mean, all of the different spiritual teachings that we now take for granted as being mythology, that's the conventional view, have people that look human, but they definitely have knowledge far, far in excess of our own. And they always have an agenda of spiritual growth. Now, granted, there are evil, negative extraterrestrials as well, and we've talked about that extensively, the most common type being a reptilian type, although apparently certain types of reptilian humanoids are not negative. It's not like all of them are negative, but the majority of them around us are. But however, 95% of all the intelligent life that's around our galaxy, working with our military-industrial complex, deep underground, off-planet, all these things people have told me, they are not negative at all. They are spiritual beings, and they're very, very interested in us learning the same basic concepts that they call ageless wisdom. Ageless wisdom is essentially service to others. Ageless wisdom basically is teaching you that if you treat other people well, that you will be treated well in return and you will get positive karma, positive things coming into your life. Whereas, if you're negative, conniving, manipulative, destructive, jealous, angry, vindictive, controlling, manipulating, all these kinds of things, there's going to be events in your life that are bad. There's going to be things that happen to you. You might cut yourself. You might have a car accident. Your house might burn down. You might have an economic collapse. You might have any number of terrible things, betrayals, a relationship falls apart on you. Your children hate you. They whatever it is, okay? But I'm talking now about the idea that, like, you're having a hateful thought about someone and then you immediately cut your finger and now you're bleeding. And it wouldn't appear to a normal, uninitiated person that there's any correlation between the cutting of your finger and the thought that was just going through your mind. However, after being somebody who's had many, many years in the trenches spiritually, at least it is my opinion, and I believe I can prove it with a great deal of fact, that there is no infraction of others' free will that is not balanced with karma. The universe is absolutely precise, such that to whatever degree you measure out some type of unpleasant experience to others, you are mandated that a similar type of experience happens to you. Now, it doesn't mean it's in any way the same experience, but it just means that there is a correlation between the severity and type of suffering that you go through and what you put someone else through first. So then why in the world would benevolent, positive, angelic extraterrestrials authorize negative forces like this DS, deep state, again, to exist on Earth. Why? Well, that's not an easy question to answer, and it's contentious. But what we hear is that the Earth is a school, and the actions of the DS create karmic alleviation on a mass global level. So look at what's happened in the last year. This whole situation appears to have been greatly mismanaged if you're trying to look at it from a conventional normie perspective. It's been greatly mismanaged. Now it looks like, well, the damage done by locking everything down for a whole year is a lot worse than if we hadn't have done that. But we were not able to have any say in this. And what we now have is an economy that is literally on life support, and it's teetering on the brink, and there's all kinds of negative outcomes that could occur. So again, I didn't want to go into a long metaphysical essay for you, but I want to try to set the bigger stage here of why none of this really is that horrible, okay? You, as the viewer of this video, probably have a lot better karma than the average person. You probably are doing a spiritual mission to one degree or another. You're probably trying to do your best. You're probably trying to be a loving person. This matters to you. You want it to be a part of your life. Very few of our audience members are attackers or haters, and if they do want to do that, usually I find that it's usually because they're having a hard time accepting that the world is the way I've told them. If so much of what you were told is true, is incorrect information, then that seems to impugn you and your credibility. In other words, if your mind is filled with information that you trusted but turns out to be inaccurate, it reflects poorly upon you as a person. If someone like me or some of these other insiders that we've been talking about, if they come out and they tell you something that is contentious, it's a lot easier for a less sophisticated person to attack the messenger rather than to ingest the substance of the message, because that's like a poison. It's like drinking poison. To accept that the world is this screwed up, I'm not going to use profanity, but you know what I want to say. To accept the world is this screwed up is drinking that chalice of poison. It's making your life difficult. So back to the middle one here. Why would there be the need for these negative entities to exist? Why would they need to form a worldwide organization that has this level of depravity? It's all part of an agenda to produce the necessary karmic alleviation on Earth. So the spiritual sources that I've studied all seem to agree that the negative forces are authorized to exist because spiritual positive beings allow negative beings to create karma for others. However, there are very, very tight caps on what they can do. Negative entities are not allowed to do more than what you have invited, or what we have invited collectively. And one of the ways that I can tell that this current situation is not going to work out for the DS at all is that government requires the consent of the governed. This is a fundamental intrinsic point that must not be overlooked. You cannot effectively run a country if the people do not support you, and especially if the people in your military do not support you. You cannot run that country. There is no other way. There is no other way. The only way that maybe the DS could have pulled this off is if they had a push-button solution that did not require human beings, where it could all be dealt with technologically. But then we're into the AI global takeover nightmare scenario in which the AI itself and the robots and everything that it's interconnected with could become the adversary. And so you don't really want to have a mechanized push-button solution for globalism, because that would imply that you could lose control of the whole apparatus. It's a very, very dangerous, slippery slope, even for highly negative people, if that's what they're trying to do. You have to have soldiers who are acquiescent, who have been brainwashed with propaganda over many, many years, who do not have any problem with your agenda, who support you, and in fact, in most of these countries where it really gets locked down under this very tight repression, They'll even refer to the leader as the God Emperor. Okay, and there's a worship. There's a sense of divinity with the leader, and this, of course, goes back to divine right of kings and the fact that it used to be unelected kings and queens running countries and not any part of having to do with voting. So why am I telling you all this stuff? I'm saying this because the negative allows I'm sorry, let me say that again. The positive allows negativity to occur to the degree that it's invited. So karmic alleviation has been happening on Earth at this time over the last year. There's a massive economic upheaval. So many people have lost their businesses. So many people have had a discontinuous negative shift in their lifestyle. And we've all gotten stuck at home. So the whole freedom that we used to have, everybody's basically spent a year under arrest. And this is almost exactly equivalent to any type of normal house arrest. You don't have a collar on your ankle, but you might as well. Because even if you wanted to go somewhere, there's no incentive anymore. It's the incentive is to stay home. However, that too is not necessarily a bad thing. All of my life as a spiritual mystic, I've lived that way. I stay at home. I don't go out very much. I meditate. I contemplate. I play music. I study. I read. And once you get through the need for constant distraction, and you actually are able to manifest happiness in silence and prolonged seclusion, you do have, in my opinion, a spiritual breakthrough. You become more enlightened, you become more focused, you become more dedicated, and a lot less distracted. And along with that comes the alleviation of many emotional crutches that we usually use. Most people are highly emotionally dependent. And I'm not saying that to be critical. I'm saying that codependency is a major, major issue. Most people are very, very concerned with what other people think about them. And all of us have had to face that head on with the internet, because you cannot live a public life on the internet. And anybody who goes on social media of any kind is now a public person. You cannot live publicly on the internet without getting attacked. And therefore, if your life is predicated upon how others see you, and you take every voiced opinion as if it was relevant, you're going to be very upset by the kind of flack that you get online. And so we're all having to go through this process of learning to give ourselves an intrinsic pat on the back, an intrinsic self-worth, regardless of what other people think about us. You give it to yourself. You give yourself that gift that as long as you know that you're doing your best, you will thoughtfully consider opinions that others might have if they're negative, but you're not going to live your life as if those opinions define you or are even relevant. As long as you are conscientiously listening to your suggestions, if you would call them that, that's a very nice term for what people do. If you listen to your suggestions and you thoughtfully try to apply them to the best of your ability, then you're doing the best you can. And then you have to just cut cords with all this hatred. So the negative is allowed to work within certain constraints. And one of those constraints that we have to work through is what I have been heard, it's been told to me in dreams and other methods, a concept of divine indifference. Divine indifference essentially means getting to the point where, as the Tibetan monks would say, that you have transcended two things. You've transcended fear, and that seems pretty obvious, but you also transcend hope. And why? I can transcend fear. I can get that one. Although that's a very, very, very difficult discipline, by the way. And it takes years and years and years to truly become fearless. I'm not there yet, but I think I've made a lot of progress on that one. But then to transcend hope is it doesn't mean that you expect everything's going to be bad. Hope implies that you are afraid. There is fear underlying hope. The fear that underlies hope is the idea that it's not going to be okay. But the simple fact that you are a being with an eternal timeline indicates to you that there is a continuity of your awareness after your physical body drops. So that is not even able to be disputed scientifically. It's an established, proven fact that people can be clinically dead, which is cessation of brain waves, cessation of heart rate, and cessation of respiration, those three things, but they still have a contiguous experience of the room that they were in. They understand what the doctors are saying. There was one person who flew out above his body and saw a shoe that was on the top of the building, which doesn't seem normal. It must have come out of an airplane or something. Sure enough, they went up there and saw the shoe. There's even cases of people who materialized in front of their loved ones as a ghost while they were having a near-death experience and later came back alive, and both parties in that conversation, the ghost and the person, remember the same conversation. If we were dealing in an honest world, this would all be stuff that everybody knows. The universe fundamentally is spiritual, and it's a positive spiritual universe. I talked last time about the idea that the Christ consciousness is actually the mind of our galaxy, which also would imply that the being that manifested as Jesus is showing us that it is a galactic template for humans. Hence, the Logos made man in its own image, right? God, the Logos, those terms are interchangeable in the Bible. The Logos is the galaxy, and sure enough, what we hear from all these people working in these classified programs is that there are human beings all over the galaxy. And they all have the 95% that are positive, they all have a very spiritual outlook. So, learning what life on Earth is about is very important. And it really comes down to, are you aware of this spiritual reality or not? And if you're not, you get many, many times to come back and try it again. For those who have a trouble with reincarnation, it's important to understand that Christianity actually does teach it. It's just that it's been suppressed by the mainstream religions. But there are plenty of evidences in Scripture that show reincarnation in effect. One of them was when one of the apostles asked Jesus, who has sinned, this man or his father, or his parents rather? Who has sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? How could this man have sinned and be born blind? That's right in the Bible, folks. And there's a lot of other examples of this. St. Clement of Alexandria had worked with one of the founding fathers of Christianity, and he said that the big secret of Christianity was reincarnation. It was a secret teaching that Jesus did not teach to the masses, but the apostles knew about it, and it went from Paul, I guess, to Origen, and then Origen gave it to St. Clement, and that's how we know about it. And Origen, by the way, wrote De Principiis, which is one of the classic religious works on the origin of Christianity. So I don't think we're ever going to get most Christians on board with reincarnation. This is a damage that was done by the Cabal, by the Roman Empire way back in the day, excising these aspects from the Bible as much as possible, but they weren't perfect enough to get rid of all of them. And once you understand that you have an eternal soul and that you do reincarnate, it takes away the concept of a punitive hell that you could go to. The hell that we experience is really here on Earth. It's our karma when we live lives where we're infringing on others' free will all the time. And then how that blows back into our own lives. So, again, I'm sorry if this seems like I'm sermonizing or getting too far off topic, but what I really want to establish here is that when you begin to awaken, when you begin to understand that you are in a spiritual reality, you will start to see a cause and effect relationship between the thoughts in your mind and the actions that you take, and then the results. And so with me, I would be reading books, and I would get this nudged. The books would be giving me something very valuable. I've been doing research again since 1992, 93, very intensively. I'd be reading a particularly poignant moment. I hadn't looked at the clock in God knows how long, 3 hours. And right at the moment that I look up, it's a repeating digits on the digital clock. So you'll see 333 or 444 or 555 or 1111 or 1212 or 123 or 1234. There's a few different permutations like that, but not that many. 111, 222, 333, etc. Now, there's many, many other examples of this, and most of my published books do discuss synchronicity. And actually, many of you end up having them off of what I'm talking about. In fact, I think I have a couple slides on that, so I wanted to set those aside in case I needed them, and here they are. All right, so let's go back to the slide. And this is just an example of two people who had synchronicity while they were watching one of my videos. Amy Proud said, wow, I was just talking about Buddy Guy last night. I'm listening to his music. This is crazy. And so I had mentioned that my father wrote the biography of Buddy Guy. So this was an example of somebody getting a crazy synchronicity. And here's another one. I'm not even joking. I went to sleep late and it's morning now. I'm a bit tired. Literally, as I was watching this video and was about to nod off, I hear David say, don't fall asleep yet at the 40:50 mark. Then I look at the time as he said this and it's 1:23 p.m. If that's not synchronicity, then I don't know what is. Thank you, James Lewis. And yes, I do read your comments, everybody. So I want to be clear on that. Now let me just go back to where we were. I had that set aside because I knew it wouldn't be at an obvious moment. Okay, back to the main camera here now. Or I guess we already were. So, are those synchronicities meaningless? Not once you start having them. It's annoying when people who have not had this happen to them try to tell you what's reality, try to tell you what to believe, when they don't really understand this because they haven't had the experience. So part of synchronicity is having a childlike open-mindedness to the possibility that you could be given unusual information from an unusual method, that your life itself is spiritual and is having spiritual things happen that you might not normally see. And you can also encode synchronicity. Some people have a synchronicity that involves seeing a coin on the ground. It could be a nickel, a dime, a penny, whatever. There's tons and tons of different examples. Some people like shamanism and they look for totem animals. If you have a certain animal that you see at a certain time, that's important. I'm very big on number patterns. I get them on the odometer on my car. I get them on license plates, billboards, clocks, all this kind of stuff. Then there's also the type of synchronicity in which you are thinking about a person and then they connect with you, or you're thinking a certain type of thought and then someone else verbalizes the same thing that you're thinking. I've had many synchronicities where I'm actually listening to music in my mind and the music has a particular rhythmic pattern and then someone else around me will do the exact same rhythmic pattern at the exact same beat. I've had it with car horns, all kinds of strange stuff. And again, once you allow yourself to accept that synchronicity and spiritual guidance could happen for you, it's going to come in like a flood. It's going to be huge. It'll be constant. And I actually gauge my life and the success with which I'm performing my spiritual mission after all these years by the quantity of synchronicity that's happening to me. So I've always lived with the idea that this world, that life on Earth is fundamentally spiritual in nature. It is not just an acausal, over here, yeah, random universe. It's actually a spiritually organized system in which events that are happening in your life are the result of what you've been creating. And again, don't get hung up on bad karma because positive karma is equally mandatory. If you start doing lots and lots of things to help humanity, you will get your positive karma coming back. You might go through great trial and tribulation, but you will get positive karma eventually. And the magnitude of your offering to others is the magnitude of the positive karma that comes back to you. While there are certain forces on Earth that obviously do not agree with this, the elite, as you could call them, have a very atheistic viewpoint compared to this. They consider themselves to be above and beyond morals, ethics, and laws. They consider themselves to be equivalent to a natural force like a wildfire, and there's no karma on fire. Fire just burns things down, and that's the way it is. You can't judge the fire. Well, it doesn't work that way if you're a human being. We're all equally judged by the one infinite creator. You cannot get around that. You cannot get around that you are responsible for your actions. And according to the Edgar Cayce readings, which I hold in high esteem, this is the 14,000 medical readings that were done by the noted American psychic Edgar Cayce from the early 20th century to 1945. I guess 1920s is around when he started. With no other information except for someone's name and their address and the agreement that they would be there at that address on the day of the reading, he would apparently visit them in a non-physical way, diagnose their medical condition, and prescribe treatment. The Cayce readings also said that karma requires multiple lifetimes to be meted out. And this is one of the reasons why we have reincarnation. A lot of times you're not going to be able to experience enough suffering in one lifetime to balance what you've done to others. And therefore you are mandated to spread out the karma over multiple lifetimes. And then the Cayce readings also said that once you have reached a level at which you are essentially now not a negative person, but you've become like a spiritual person and you're more positive, you might still have lifetimes of negative karma to work off. So just because you're not creating new karma for yourself now that's bad, doesn't mean you're not going to have karmic events, because other lifetimes you might have gotten in a lot of trouble. We end up killing people, we end up violating people, we end up doing horrible things to people, and that all ends up reiterating in different ways as time goes on. So there were several people in the Cayce readings who had laughed and cheered in the Roman Colosseums while Christians were being mauled by lions. And in one case, a guy was laughing as a little girl had the whole side of her body eaten out by a lion. He came back with a crippling condition in the same part of the body where the little girl was wounded. So don't ever assume that whatever is happening to you is senseless. There's personal karma that could be multi-incarnational, and there's collective karma. And as I've said all along, I believe that we are going through a great awakening, a collective ascension process. The solar system is heating up. It's a validation of these ancient religious prophecies from many cultures. And therefore, I have never doubted for a minute that we are going to have a soft landing and that it's going to be okay. If you are not really appreciating what the class of Earth is here to teach you, then you might not be ready to turn into an ascended being. At that point, if you do ascend, you're now moving into a reality where you have all the cool stuff that Jesus manifested, the telekinesis, the levitation, the telepathy, all of that becomes normal. It might not happen right away, but it does. And this is not for everyone. You don't just get it handed to you. You have to have appreciated the positive. You have to be slightly more than 50% oriented towards helping people rather than manipulating and controlling them. Service to others as opposed to service to self. So if you reach that service to others threshold, if you're at that over 50% level, even if you're just slightly over it, then when this solar event takes place, which I absolutely believe is going to happen, I've got tons of science on that, then you'll be fine and you get transformed. The Bible has probably the most extensive discussion of this in the book of Matthew chapter 13. And this is where it discusses the concept of the harvest. And Jesus makes a parable of the wheat and the tares. Now, a tare is a weed. So the basic, most important biblical metaphor of ascension is Jesus making an analogy. This is my opinion. Others might have a different one, but in my opinion, Matthew 13 is the bottom line. Most important part of the Bible's teachings on this, and Jesus makes an analogy saying that the kingdom of heaven is equivalent to a crop, and that the holy positive forces plant wheat in the crop, and then the adversary, the negative one, the evil forces are allowed to plant weeds in the crop. Now, normally you wouldn't do that, and normally if you have a crop and there's weeds that become visible in the crop, as the crops are growing, you're going to have footpaths between them, and you can walk down, and if you see weeds, you pull them out. Everybody at the time of Jesus would know this. So why in the world wouldn't you pull the weeds out as they're growing? This is where Jesus starts to speak in a parable and gets paradoxical, because what does Jesus say? He says, we must allow the wheat and the weeds to grow to their full extensions first, and only at the time of the harvest will the weeds be plucked from the wheat one by one, gathered into bundles and burned in my barn. And that's, again, a metaphor. So there's this idea that at the end time, that there is some sort of separation in which the negative elements are isolated and identified and plucked out one by one. This is a biblical prophecy. And what we're now seeing with the indictments that are sealed is that this is taking place. People are being plucked out one by one. They pop open a sealed indictment, they grab somebody, and they close it up again. And so this is happening over and over again. Much of the DS has already been defeated. And we talked last week about how the Pindar has already been nailed, the top guy, in this case in the Rothschild banking dynasty family. So that's not insignificant at all. That's a very, very significant thing. Okay, so let's go back now to our slides, because I guess I need to switch for a minute. So going to the slides, I was talking about some of these anomalies in the opening of the timing of the Inog, as we'll call it. I'm not going to say the whole thing. Where it's set, and again, I have to speak in code, so don't hate on me, folks. There's a really good reason for this. By the way, RP78, I love his work. He's right up there with X, and then the number 22, and then report. And Mike with the last name Adams, as I've said before. These are the top three go-to guys for me. If I'm going to spend time and really want to sink my teeth into something, it's going to be probably Mike first, then X, and then RP78 in that order. That's the order in which, and it's no particular sequence, except that this is what I like to see. So before we get back to the more lofty stuff, I wanted to, again, we were talking about the many anomalies that were surrounding this event that took place. And again, we'll bring it back into the greater spiritual perspective as time goes on. So the first one was that there was no welcoming by the former president. That's not that surprising. And then we saw, again, this situation where Dr. Gina was saying that the country will wake up to realize a devastating loss on Wednesday. This was the first clue that it might not be a mass arrest. And we're going to talk a lot more about what is going to happen and why I don't think this is bad. The next thing, again, that is definitely provable is that the former president actually took the football with him to Florida. And so it says right here, DT's decision to skip JB's Inog has sparked wargame tactics as the traditional handover of the presidential encodes is canceled. The outgoing president's plan to shun the Inog and travel straight to his Florida home this morning has created a serious logistical headache for military leaders. Now, oh, well, that's not really true. That's just some guy, RP70. No, I just typed it in on DuckDuckGo here, because that's what I'm using now, not the other one. And sure enough, read these headlines. B is going to get a second set of codes after T took the first set to Florida. Well, I think it might make him feel comfortable that he thinks he's got a set of them. I don't know if it's really true. So this is very, very strange. The next very, very strange thing is that there was no military air escort to the Inog. He actually had to take a private jet. That has never happened in all of American history. And this suggests, again, that the military does not support him. The next thing, which you may or may not have seen, is that as the motorcade was driving through, and this is a big deal. There's a lot of fanfare. There's a big bunch of vehicles, and they're going to have flags on them, and it's supposed to be a big deal. If you go back and you watch this video, no one salutes the motorcade if they're facing it, which they're normally supposed to do. That is accepted mandatory protocol. They never salute, and they also are not facing it. More than 50% of them have their backs turned. And of course, as you can imagine, all the so-called fact checkers have now looked at this and, let's go over to this camera here. It's been thoroughly discredited. None of this is true. This is all nonsense. I looked it up today. So they've already come up with their spin. They've already come up with their excuse. Okay, well, it looks pretty freaking obvious to me. And there are multiple cases. There's an example of JB walking past two soldiers, and out loud he says, "Salute the soldiers," which is what someone was telling him. Those are the words he heard in his earpiece, but he's used to just speaking what he's told to say. And in this case, they were giving him an order to salute the soldiers, but he's so demented he can't actually realize what he's being told to do. So he just said it out loud. That's very strange. Then his wife tries to shake the hand of one of the National Guard and gets snubbed. Oh, fact check, it's all been disproven. Well, okay, how about the next one here? At the actual event itself, these National Guard guys did not have any insignia on their uniforms. Notice that in this picture from the inaug, there's no anything. There's no stuff on their sleeves. There's no stuff on the top of the shoulders. There's no stuff on the front lapel. There's nothing at all. And that's everybody. They're all like that. Whereas, and so this is not an accident, folks. This is not random and it's not an accident. Whereas if you look at the inauguration of George W. Bush, here they're all wearing typical military regalia, and you see the guy standing next to him. I mean, there's lots of stuff. You know, he's got the ceremonial thing over his right shoulder. He's got all these things on his lapel, on the jacket. I mean, everywhere. So medals, everything, gingerbread, whatever it's called, you know. And there is not any type of intelligence sharing from the military with this allegedly new occupant. So look at this. Really quite shocking. Inside the ugly transition at the Pentagon. The Pentagon blocked members of President JB's incoming administration from gaining access to critical information about current operations, including the troop drawdown in Afghanistan, upcoming special operations missions in Africa, and the Coup-19 distribution program, according to new details provided by The effort to obstruct the B team, led by senior White House appointees, is unprecedented in modern presidential transitions. Oh, we got some coyotes right outside. You guys hear that? Is that audible?
It's pretty neat.
Yeah, okay. It freaks me out every time they do that. It does.
They're very close.
Oh yeah, they're like right outside the window. Okay, so the effort to obstruct the B team, led by senior WH appointees, is unprecedented. Oh man, they're really going at it. Unprecedented in modern presidential transitions and will hobble the new administration on key national security matters as it takes over positions in the Defense Department on Wednesday, the official said. B openly decried the treatment his aides were receiving at the Pentagon, calling it nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility. After meetings at Christmas, he said his people were denied information on the solar, you know what that all is, the hack, etc. Okay. The next strange anomaly, despite the fact that there appears to be zero cooperation between the military and the alleged new president, is this, and this came out in the insider stuff that's been circulating. Washington Monument and the White House went dark tonight. This was the night of January 20th, the night of the inaug. No one seems to be able to explain why. And that's another one of those loose ends that we don't really know what it is, but there's been many of these power outages, and apparently what's been happening is the military has been gathering evidence. They're gathering evidence, and they're building a case. Now, why didn't they do mass arrests on the 20th? Apparently it's because they felt that there was going to be such a public shock and outcry that at least some states or some entities organized in some fashion would create some kind of a civil war, and they were worried that this would make us very vulnerable to foreign invasion, which again, apparently it is real and very tangible that the country starting with C has troops on both the Canadian and the Mexican borders, a large number of them. We already talked about the idea that they have missiles hiding in regular shipping containers. Apparently a large number of them that they wanted to hit our grid. It's really, really dark, really scary, and really dangerous. So after that kind of thinking, you can see why the Joint Chiefs of Staff might want to do something else. They are aware that the election was stolen. They're aware that it was fraudulent. Probably shouldn't be saying all those words, but I'll try to only do it once. And they just need the public to become more accepting of how bad this is. So really what we need is an interim period, or what's called an interregnum, as you'll see in a minute. And that interregnum period is going to be where the public has to get sufficiently outraged that they will all, or most of us, will support something. And apparently the military is only waiting for the approval rating to drop to 30%. Once 70% of the real polls, and this is not manufactured, these are the polls they have on the inside where they can see what the electorate really feels. Once they've got it to 70%, they're going to move. Or there's any number of situations where overly aggressive attempts to act on behalf of this alleged new administration would cause them to move. If they do anything overly aggressive, if they do anything too crazy, that's going to trigger it. So I don't think it's going to take very long, but we are getting briefings telling us that it might not happen until the summer or even the fall. And this came from Mike, last name Adams, as I've been talking about him before. He's doing a wonderful job, and I highly recommend going to his website. You're going to see some screen grabs of it in a second here, and listen to those. Sometimes he gets a little dark or a little negative, but he's talked about that, and that's just his opinion. I totally agree that there's some scary things going on, but I support him, and I encourage you to do the same. All right, so the darkness here of the Washington Monument and the White House, that kind of stuff usually means that something is going on. So who was in there when this happened, and what did they get? What were they getting? Why did they need to turn it off? And was it the new administration doing this, or was it actually the former administration grabbing evidence? Again, was there evidence that was there that they knew they could go in and get it under the cover of a power outage? Well, that definitely looks like a possibility. Now, the next thing, this doesn't mean anything, okay, but there's a lot of speculation that the Oval Office that we're actually seeing is not the right one or the real one. JB probably would never want to go into the real White House right now because it's a trap. DC has been turned into a lockdown, and then there's a big question as to whether those troops are there for JB or are there for the Alliance. And I actually believe most of them were there for the Alliance, and to deter the possibility of this massive attack from the country starting with C. We've been praying for no violence, no violence. I was getting horrible briefings back in October about the idea that violence could be coming as early as 2 weeks before the election, that it would be potentially massive and ongoing. And so we've really done very, very well, and I do believe that our global meditations have helped. So thank you for participating in that with me. Another anomaly. Here's another one. You can see the headline right here. The House of Representatives has canceled all business during the first full week. Nobody wants to go into D.C. Why? Back to the camera, please. If they had a full confidence in the support of the military, if they weren't turning their backs on them, refusing to shake their hand, refusing to give them the football, refusing to give them intel, right? Then maybe they'd feel comfortable about the troops being there. But if the troops are there and there's this kind of total breakdown in communication and support and logistics, then that suggests they might be there for these people to do the arrest. Now, please, don't for a minute think the people in the DS don't know this. It's actually a really, really brilliant thing that DC itself has been turned into a cage. You can't get in, you can't get out, so everybody who's in there is stuck. And this is obviously something that is not finished. We don't know where this is going. We don't know exactly why this is happening, but we can speculate, and those speculations are informed speculations, as it turns out. So let me give you another anomaly from the inauguration. And my wife and I just watched this last night. It's very, very bizarre, but sure enough, there was a group of press that was on the rooftop outside the inaug, and they filmed it, and what you see is that there's literally nobody there. He said 100 people. I think it's probably more like, there's probably about 400 people there, maybe 500, based on my own experience with crowds. I'd say maybe 500, at the most 600. But then we find out that they were all National Guard, and they were forced to be there. Almost everybody that you see, they're wearing those black uniforms that have no insignias on them, no decorations, no anything. And they're forced to stand there, and they're forced to appear that there is some kind of an audience, when really there's almost nobody there at all. Nobody is supporting this. And why, well, let's hold off on that one. So this is just another one of the very strange things that are going on right now. Then we got this kind of news, which is, okay, well, that's strange, right? Why would let's say the DS, because we know the DS is responsible for at least some of the troops that are there. Why would they want them to stay through the end of January? Well, maybe it's because they want to preserve an option to defend themselves if there is a mass arrest that starts to happen. In other words, they want a civil war. Well, look at this. This just came out on January 25th, not that long ago. National Guard troops are to be kept in Washington, D.C. until mid-March. Soldiers will stay until the Democrats' second attempt at impeachment of President T is complete, according to Politico report. So that's the excuse. The excuse is, oh, we need to have everybody hang around for the second impeachment to protect the process. That is just an excuse. It's nonsense. And I think the real reason why they want to have them there until mid-March is they're expecting heavy, heavy stuff to go down between now and mid-March. And if they need it longer, they'll probably come up with another reason to have it be longer. But wait a minute. Isn't it more like an occupying power if they have put barbed wire and fencing around the Capitol and it's all surrounded with troops? Yes, that's what normally would happen. Now, one of my insiders, who's highly respected, sent me this, and I'm not going to say who again, but this is one of the people that both my wife and I have had conversations with on the phone. He is real. This is what he sent me the other night. Questions to ask someone who thinks B is the president. And some of these we've already discussed, and there's some others that I didn't catch, and so that's why I brought it in. Why was B denied a military plane to bring him to D.C.? Why was the typical song for the arrival of POTUS not played for B during the inaug? That's interesting. Why wasn't B rendered a 21-gun salute as customary? I think they got the word wrong there. Why wasn't B rendered a 21-gun salute as customary for an incoming president? Like T received on the same day, January 20th. Why was B's inaug streamed as live in Spain 10 hours before the scheduled time? I haven't checked on that one. I don't know if that's true. That's an interesting thing to look up and find out if it's real. Why did B remove his hand from the fake Bible before his oath was finished? I hadn't seen that. I couldn't watch the inaug. I'm sorry. I just couldn't handle it. Why did B get sworn in after K, which is not constitutional? Why did military turn their back to B when he drove by them rather than face and salute, which is an absolute requirement for service members? Why doesn't B seem to have the military launch codes near him? Like the ones pictured near T in Florida, which he brought with him. And why is the Pentagon blocking access for members of B's administration? Well, because they don't respect this, they don't support this, and we're in an interim period. So, here's another thing that came out on January the 17th. This is before all these things happened the way we didn't want it to or the way we didn't think it was going to happen. This particular individual said, I work at a mid-sized TV station. We just had a visit from the FCC along with two people with badges. I didn't get close enough to see what agency they were with. This was on the 17th, so this is like 3 days before. We've been told to prepare for all of our programming to be preempted from 8 a.m. Wednesday, that's the day of the inaug, for up to 72 hours. That's 3 days. They told my boss he can be held criminally liable if he doesn't allow their feed to air. He was almost in tears, saying, I've never seen anything like this after 30 years in this business. They scared the crap out of him and the district manager. Now, is this a live-action role play or LARP? Is it fake? Back to the camera. Yeah. Is it fake? Maybe. But it has that ring of truth. There's enough specifics and quirky details, kind of things I usually look for. Obviously, nothing happened, but there was clearly a readiness in case it did. And this probably is just one of many stories like this that we just haven't heard them all. Okay, back to the slide. At this juncture, Wood, I don't want to say the first name because, again, it's going to trip everything off. He has been through such horrible persecution, and it's getting worse and worse. Apparently, his own children are going to turn on him and come out in videos against him. And what was his crime, if you will? Telling us the truth and being unapologetically Christian. Telling us the truth about who's running the planet and what they're really up to, including what they're up to with children. It's really dark stuff. He's brave enough to speak about this, and he has been completely vilified. They're trying to strip his degree. They're trying to strip his law license. They're trying to everything you can imagine, just total cancel culture, just like we saw with the guy who's selling pillows, okay, Lindell, Mike. And so it's just unbelievable what's going on. And again, the military has not abandoned you. It has not abandoned us. They're just waiting for it to be more obvious that this needs to happen, that more of the electorate sees it for what it is and is angry. And once we have that useful public indignation, that's when we're going to expect it. It will probably be completely random. There's not going to be any telegraphing. We're not going to know exactly when. I just want to make that clear. If they're telling us that it could be until the summer or the fall, that's probably the longest we have to wait. My personal feeling and some of the dreams I've had, I don't think it's going to take that long. But we don't really know. So here's the thing that's really cool. Wood clearly has been passing along intel. I believe it's quite obvious that somebody was giving him information. He wasn't just opinionating or opining, as it's called, you know. So anyway, he says this. Mike A., last name Adams, is a truth giver and a patriot. When Mike speaks, listen carefully. Like me, Mike is imperfect. He may not always be exactly right, but he is much more right than he is wrong. Take his advice. Stay at home over the next several days until things become more clear. Don't take the V, and most importantly, pray we walk by faith. And then he linked to this briefing from January the 18th. Realistically, how hard is it to think that Wood has actually at this point contacted Mike? And I don't know this. I'm not in contact with Mike directly. I'd like to be, but we haven't done that yet, ever. So there's a couple guys out there, you know, who I'd like to be in contact with, just because there's so few of us who have stayed active this long and have continued to get good briefings. But all of a sudden, Mike starts getting different information, and it clearly seems that he's getting briefed. And it might not just be Wood, it might be others as well. But the tone notably changed after the inaug, starting on the January 21st. He clearly got intel. He clearly can't talk about it. He's clearly a lot more positive than he was before. And now he's got a totally new set of opinions than the one he had before he got those briefings. That's exactly what happens when you get briefings. And so if Wood is telegraphing this and giving him this massive commercial, if you will, of 422,000 subscribers, something's going on here. Okay, so I just want to be clear that Wood himself, of course, had many, many statements that he made. I covered these in great detail in previous broadcasts, and they didn't happen the way that he expected. Does this mean that he's totally wrong? No. Might he have been guilty of too much optimism? Yes. Is it possible to get a briefing that is true according to the person who tells you and the intel that they have available to them, but then it doesn't happen? Absolutely. So we must never lose track of the fact that real briefings can come in, and then people will get notified about what that intel is, and just because you get the intel doesn't mean it's going to actually happen that way. With that being said, the insiders who I do have personal contact with were expecting something to happen before or right on the inaug, and it did not. That is a fact. And we've all analyzed this now. We've all looked at it and seen for ourselves that there was cold feet. There was clearly a movement. There was clearly an objective. We wanted to see January the 6th turn into something. We wanted to see the evidence get heard before the American people. It was not. It keeps getting thrown out of court. There's 30 more cases still pending, but nobody ever gets to hear the evidence. So where is all this heading? It's a strange, strange thing, but again, Adams is getting briefings. There's no doubt in my mind, and I've been listening attentively every day to what he's saying, and I agree that whoever is giving him this information, they believe this is true, or it's what they need us to hear at this time. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Now, what we're told by these new briefings that Mike got, and it's pretty obvious from this slide I just gave you as to what the source or one of the sources might be, we need outrage. We need there to be enough public indignation that change actually happens. And so, back to the slide, those outrages are already starting to occur. Now, this is one of the ones that I haven't really had time to unpack with you guys, but the movie WW84, it is so outrageously insulting to the intelligence. It is so incredibly frustrating, conniving, manipulative, dark, scary movie. Because what they do is they took the guy who's the lead hero in everybody's favorite Star Wars product, which is the television show The Mandalorian. It's the only thing out there right now that was Star Wars oriented, and this was right as The Mandalorian show had just ended. The head guy who actually plays The Mandalorian comes back in this movie as a very, very thinly veiled attack against our former president. And if you watch the movie, if you can get through it, it's not obvious right away that the Mandalorian actor is supposed to be analogized to the former president, but I was telling my wife as we're watching it, like, yeah, it's getting more and more obvious. And what ends up happening is that this character is thoroughly, thoroughly hated on, denigrated, and marginalized, and shown in the movie to be completely irrational, angry, violent, crazy, and must be stopped. And then, at the end of the movie, the message actually comes across that this man that was played by the guy that was the Mandalorian, the most loved show out there right now, Star Wars, the big Star Wars show, that the problem that the American people have had is that they have too many wishes, and that this guy, the former Prez, was the person who wants all the wishes out there in the world. So all you have to do is stop wishing for things, and it will all go away. So that's the conclusion of the movie. The conclusion of the movie is stop wanting anything, stop wishing for anything, which sounds a lot like everybody accept the same basic income, the same basic situation. That's communism, right? That's what we know. Then you see a red 5-star balloon released. Oh, and the other thing I didn't mention was the creepy Asian guy with the red star on his lapel that was right behind JB during the inauguration. My wife saw that. Lots of other people saw that as well. And that guy's always around. And he's flagrantly displaying this. So if you go watch WW84, right at the end, they release this red star-shaped balloon up into the air, and it's propaganda. It's brainwashing. They want you to accept a future regime in which they are in control. And they already own Hollywood, this country, the majority shareholders. And so WW84 is like a weird piece of propaganda. So going back to this slide now, it did strike me as kind of interesting when you read the text at the bottom here that they're taking it off of HBO Max. Now, this is one of the things that got a lot of traditional Hollywood mad, is that they came out with this, instead of being in the theaters, even though it's a big budget film, they shamelessly tried to manipulate everybody into subscribing to HBO Max. People did not like that. It did not work out well. And the movie itself was not enjoyable to most people. The story doesn't even really make sense. It doesn't track very well, just as a script. So why would they be taking it off of HBO Max on January 24th? Well, maybe because too many people are aware of this, and it's only 4 days after the inaug, right? So maybe they realize, this is too obvious, and I'm sure there's other ways people can get it after this, but it's strange, isn't it? Strange that they use it as a carrot, and then they tried to get people to subscribe, and then once you're in there, now they take it away. But I think it's because they don't want people watching it, because now it's way too obvious, and the outcome worked very negatively. And so please, I want to see your videos cracking down this movie. Take screen captures of that balloon and some of the scenes of the Mandalorian guy freaking out in front of the presidential seal, by the way, on the podium, having these meltdowns, telling us that the problem is that we have too many wishes and we need to stop wishing for anything. I don't think Americans are going to think that way. I don't think we're all going to accept a fixed income. That's just not how we work. The next big outrage is a lot more public. Back to the slide. And this was that the soldiers who were stationed in the Capitol building by JB were sent to a cold parking garage in which like 3,000 of them, something like that, had to share one bathroom. There's no heat, there's no bedding, there's no pillows, there's no blankets, there's nothing. They had to sleep on the floor. And so, as it says here, we got kicked out of the Capitol and Senate buildings. Thanks for protecting us. Go to the parking garage now. If you don't realize how big this is to the military, then it's because you don't have the experience with the military. You cannot experience a betrayal of this magnitude and have nothing happen. The military are never going to forget this, because one night of them living in that condition is unacceptable. What did the former president do? he invited all of them in to the International Hotel, the T International Hotel, T is the name, of course, in Washington, D.C. And that is, I've seen it, I've been in it. It's an incredible, incredible building. It was the former post office, the headquarters of the whole post office in the United States, I guess. And there was, when I was talking to the front desk guy, he was saying that they had to keep all the original architecture in there. So there's kind of these strange metal beams when you go into the main lobby, which is a really, really big area. And that's apparently for structural support for the building, so they couldn't remove it. But the rooms are fantastic. Ivanka apparently did all the decor, and it's a great place to visit. And so it totally warmed my heart to realize that these men and women were treated with honor and respect. And of course, the former president, that's a big expense. You know, just paying for the utilities and the staffing to clean the rooms is significant. The food, all this kind of stuff, they were given pizza. It's incredible. And so it becomes pretty clear how each of these presidents are going to treat the military. Now, the next thing, let's go back to the slide again, that's a major, major outrage that's causing huge problems, is the cancellation of this particular pipeline, which I'm not going to say out loud for obvious reasons again. And here's a link to one of these. Premiers tell Trudeau they want to go to war with the U.S. over the XL, sources. Now, what is really happening here? If you study this, the indigenous people on the lands that will have this running through it, this pipe running through it, they want it because it's jobs for their people, it's money for their economy, it supports healthcare, it supports education, it supports food, and it supports infrastructure. They themselves want this to happen. This is a good thing for the U.S. because it allows us to no longer be dependent upon foreign oil. So all of a sudden, this enormous project that's got 40,000 jobs, it's already well underway, is canceled. Some people are estimating that up to 1 million jobs will be eliminated, and it takes away our country's ability to be independent for energy. It puts the focus back on the Middle East, which the former president had completely withdrawn from. The whole area, all these theaters of war, withdrawn. Now all of a sudden, ISIS has suddenly popped up again. Now they're back. Oh, now we got to send troops back in again. More war. Taking jobs away, taking energy independence away, creating new wars. This is an outrage. It really is. And let me give you another example. This one again from the X report here. And this is from our favorite, quote-unquote, social media giant. And it says, I'm not going to read this out loud, but it's the lawsuit against this company in which a minor was coerced into doing something that was explicit. It was uploaded by an adult. The minor proved his age, asked them to take it down, and they said, no, we don't find there to be any violation of our policies. Well, I've encountered this myself in many, many cases where horrible things have happened, and I've tried to get any type of justice. I follow the rules. I've even had lawyers send letters. Nothing ever gets done. Nothing ever gets taken down. But then again, you're on the other side of this. If you're in my position, cancel culture, any of us can lose everything that we've built, and it's already happened to most of us. So I'm kind of amazed I still even have the ability to do a live stream at all. The alternative platforms are starting to develop that capacity, but it's not really there. If you want to do a live global meditation, this is the way to do it. It's the only way to do it right now. So, another strange outrage that just happened. This was again covered by the X report here, in which the WHO put out a statement about something that everybody who's really studied this understands. There are 3 letters that you need to hear, and the letters are P, C, and R, okay? And when you put those 3 letters together and you have a test, this type of a test, and I'm just going to refer to it as a test from now on, this type of a test has a certain threshold at which a positive result will be determined. If you go above, let's say, a threshold of 35 to 40, there's such a possibility of a negative positive result that you've probably seen all this. You're seeing ice cream test positive, avocados test positive, anything and everything you can imagine. Substances that aren't even alive, they're testing positive. And so if you go to websites like Zero Hedge, which is one of the ones that has been all over this over and over again, almost on a daily basis, they mention this. The level that these tests are dialed in at, they take a 40 as a positive, which means everybody's going to test positive. You can't possibly not test positive. So now all of a sudden, this WHO thing is saying no. We have to dial down the threshold. So again, let's go back to reading it. WHO guidance states that careful interpretation of weak positive results is needed. The cycle threshold needed to detect the V is inversely proportional to the patient's V load. Where test results do not correspond with the clinical presentation, a new specimen should be taken and retested using the same or different technology. So this is the bottom line is that this is telling us that the positive results are not really positive. Well, what they've done now is rolled it back. By lowering the threshold, now you're not going to test unless you really have something. And so the cases are going to drop drastically, and this is all in perfect correlation with the new INOG and what's happened ever since. And so figure it out. They want to retire this problem. The globalists have said too many people are aware of it, too many people aren't playing along, too many people know the truth, so we're just going to make it go away now. And the way you do that is by changing the method. So this came out, it was very contentious. These videos linked to it, and then I typed in the link. I got it perfect. I was going to where they linked to it, and this is what you see now. Oh, well, isn't that something? This page cannot be found. So I actually had to use the link that gave me this result and put it into archive.org, our old friend, and then I was able to pull this up. And so there you go. So it is true that they took it down already. They don't want people to read this already, and you have to go back into the archive. So a lot of people, myself included at first, were horrified by this. And I honestly didn't want to make videos until I'd had some time to really pray and meditate and think about this, because it seemed really awful. And so I'm sorry that I left you hanging. But honestly, the way that I respond to something like this is I do tons and tons and tons of research. I want to know what's really going on. So we're going to now go into an analysis of empirical data that to me suggests very strongly that nothing that we're seeing is outside of the plan. The big plan, the plan for mass arrest, the plan for a positive future, the plan for an economic jubilee, redistribution that's not the Great Reset, but actually something much better. All those things I think are coming into view now. So let's go back to the slide. And the question that we're now going to be asking is, was this outcome anticipated by the Alliance? And I believe the answer is yes. And there are still many reasons to expect a very positive future. So the attorney named Wood, as I said, flagged this particular individual on Mike on January the 18th. And then just 3 days later, on the 21st, he comes out with this, the astonishing case for optimism faith, the day after this happened. And this is where he obviously had new intel, new briefings, and his message changed. And he's saying that it might not happen until the summer or even the fall, which to me is just intolerable. But oh my God, okay, well, it's better than nothing, right? We got to be hopeful for whatever scraps we can get here. So again, in that video, he says that the military is waiting for the approval to drop to 30%, and once it does, they will act. Now, apparently, there was a lot of disagreement about whether there was going to be any action at all, and that's part of why we didn't get anything on National Popcorn Day or on the INOG itself. But that has since changed, and so one of the important briefings that Mike got was that all of the people at the top brass in the military, back to the slide, they all were shown evidence that they are on a kill list, meaning that, as is typically the case with these types of revolutions, which is what this is, an attempted revolutionary overthrow, if you will, that normally is followed by all of the top people in the former regime or the former administration being killed off, the top military people. So they were shown solid, incontrovertible proof that with an auditable track record that this is what was going to be planned. Now, we also heard that there were going to be persecutions of patriots and that they were going to try to send people out to harass, intimidate, threaten, or kill anybody who had supported the former president. The military has very firmly said they will not do this. They will not follow any unlawful orders, and they will protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, which is right in the Oath of Enlistment. And the letter that they sent out shows this. So what's really going on, back to the slide, is that we are right now in a period that is actually called an interregnum. This is not something I made up. Here it is on dictionary.com. Interregnum is an interval of time between the close of a sovereign's reign and the accession of his or her normal or legitimate successor. Yeah, there's actually a word for that. Isn't that cool? Number 2, any period during which a state has no ruler or only a temporary executive. Key point. Number 3, any period of freedom from the usual authority. Number 4, any pause or interruption continuity. So a temporary executive in an interval of time between the close of a sovereign's reign and the accession of his or her normal legitimate successor. Now, the next thing that shows me that we don't need to freak out and that we have reason for hope, or really just confidence, because hope, again, is, coming out of a place of fear. And I'm going to unpack this a lot more, so we're just kind of getting into it now, but let's get started with this. So back to the slide again. General F, I'm not going to say that out loud either because of obvious reasons. He and other insiders are projecting enormous confidence despite what things look like. So General F says T will be president the next 4 years in an interview with Alex. And this was not that long ago. It's very recent, and this is obviously before the debacle that has since ensued. Why was he so confident? And why have others like Pompeo said the same thing? And several others, all the top people, they're very confident. Well, there's probably something that they know that we don't know. There's probably something that General F knows that he is not saying out loud. And we're going to see this because, get a load of this now. He dropped these hints, back to the slide, of a 30-day waiting period. And I first saw this again on the X Report. And so this is the original slide that I took, and then I'm going to widen it a little bit just so you can read it better. This is a quote from George Washington from December 31st, 1776, where he was encouraging his men not to give up on the American Revolution and to re-enlist. And this is the key. And he published this, by the way, on December 31st. So the same day that the actual original quote was made. December 31st, of course, is before the inaug took place, before anything happened. So we were already getting briefings from some of our sources at the same time, right around this area of the end of December. And I didn't want to believe it. I talked to my wife about it. I'm like, I don't know. But all the way back then, we were already starting to get briefings that it might take, that we might need to actually see this inauguration go differently than we expected, that there's going to be, the exact opposite outcome of what we wanted, and that there's going to be an interregnum, a period of time before the next legitimate event takes place, and that there's a temporary executive kind of thing. The military is just going to allow this to happen and get that public indignation up to where it's 70% indignation, 30% apparent approval, at which point they will act. So, if that is true, then it appears that what General F is doing here is he's asking us all for a little more time and to be patient. So let's read the quote from George Washington now. Back to the slide. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer. Well, what is that 1 month? Is that after the inaug? That would be, well, we'll do the math in just a second. Okay, if you will consent to stay 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty and to your country, which you probably can never do under any other circumstances. So basically what we're being told is a period of apparently 1 month to hang on and to render service to the cause of liberty in your country, which you will never be able to do under any other circumstances. In other words, there's never going to be another time like the next 30 days again. So let's do the math now. Back to the slide. January the 20th, which is when I think he was referring to, plus 30 days gets us to February 19th. That's not very far. Now, there's going to be a whole bunch of people where if it's February 20th and nothing's happened, they're all mad. I don't believe that the 30 days, and this is my opinion, I could be wrong. I don't believe the 30 days is necessarily an exact figure as much as it was a great George Washington quote that could be synchronized on December 31st again, and it refers to a small period of time. I don't know if it's only 30 days, but it's not very long, and we are being encouraged through these weird hidden messages to have faith and to stay involved and to not give up. And now with all these anomalies that I was pointing out, the guys are not saluting, they don't wear any insignias on the uniforms, there's nobody else there, they're not giving them the football. There's a funny button on the Secret Service call button that's always been on the desk and it's not there for him. It goes on and on and on. The weird power outage on that night, all kinds of stuff. So we don't know what the period is, but let's just take that 30-day period as something that we might want to look for. So this is where I'm going to start going back to the letter that you love. A certain letter in the alphabet that might be about 17 after the beginning. But we can't talk about, I don't even want to say that number out loud anymore because of how everything is looking. So we'll just say the letter that you love, right? Or I'll come up with some other cool things to say. This is something that, again, it only came out in 2017, October, but I've been giving you briefings on these mass arrests since 2009, which I got from firsthand sources. Direct firsthand sources, long conversation, detailed information, which I've been sharing for a long time. So for me, when the letter that you love came out, it wasn't anything new. It was just a refinement of stuff that I'd already been telling you guys for 8 years by that point, I guess. So what I want to do now is take a lot of the things that the X report has been saying. Dave, I think that's his name. He's wonderful guy. And really an amazing researcher, and he's been leaking these different quotes from different particular drops in this set of material. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry that I have to be so vague, but he's quoting from these different citations, and so what I've done is to bring them all together under one roof and do some additional research, because now what we're getting is analysis of a current situation that we're now in. And Dave has been going back in time and looking at the entirety of this body of almost 5,000 pieces of text, 5,000 different drops. He's gone back to the beginning and he's arguing that they knew all along that it was going to have to go this way, what would happen, what they would need to do. I think it's cool to put it all together under one roof and look at it all at once, and that's what we're going to do now. So if this is the part of my work that you love the most, then this is where we're really going to get into some stuff that's going to blow your doors off. There's some great, great quotes here to look at. So again, this is the letter that you love, and we're going to be looking for the 30 days. First of all, did they ever mention 30 days? Well, they did, and they did it in a shocking way. So let's go back to this. The first one we're going to look at is 4770. And before we get into all the other stuff, I'm just showing you the whole thing here. Let's just zoom in on this part. First of all, notice the date. This is March 27th, 2018. And someone on the boards had said, free F. And I'm sorry I still have to keep doing that, but it's very important. So it says above there in the text, if you read it above, on March 27th, an Anon said he wanted General F freed. The source responded that it would be done in 30. So, now, maybe there's something else to this. I don't know, okay? But this is very, very strange because you have the mention of this name, the name that starts with an F. And then just remember, what did he just say to us? He just said, you need 1 month longer. You need 30 more days. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer, right? Okay, so there's your 30 days. So they say free General F, and then the answer is done in 30, house cleaning, WH, White House secured, final stage. Now just think about that for a second. How weird is that? What if, at the point that this was written back on March 27th, 2018, they already knew that they would need to create that useful public indignation. They need to create the Joan of Arc, all is lost point, where it appears that the hero's quest is completely defeated. This is the only way to get that useful public indignation. Joan of Arc didn't actually defeat the British. She only inspired the French people by being martyred to defeat the British. Did God really guide her? I believe so, but how did that guidance manifest? By the apparent failure of her mission. And so I've discussed extensively the hero's journey, which is what I believe to be a galactic blueprint for our soul's evolution. Actually, let's go over to this camera, because this is a fun camera to have when I talk about this kind of stuff. This is like the more spiritual side of the show, you see. When I go over here, I got this cool little ball right here, and I got my book, and, you know, that's, Beth wanted me to do that. And so, you know, it's, please buy the book, by the way. It is really worth it. It's like $20. It's nothing.
The book there, I think it looks
Yeah,
nice.
you did.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, now I came all the way over to this camera angle. I got to remember what the heck I was talking about. Okay, here it is. Done in 30, house cleaning, White House secured, final stage. So first of all, what does final stage mean? The final stage of something. Well, we're in the final stage, right? The final stage would be the last thing that happens before the arrests. Well, then it says White House secured. Secured by who? Secured by the new occupant? Maybe that's what it means. Maybe, you know, and it says done in 30, and it's in context of General F. Well, General F has just said, I need 30 days. It says done in 30, White House secured. The Patriots will secure it. It's going to come back. House cleaning. House is capitalized. That has to do with House of Representatives. House cleaning. And it also has to do with White House, right? So done in 30, there's a house cleaning. It will be secured, but first you have to clean. So, and this is the final stage. That's very, very compelling, but there's more. There's more. Check this out. Back to the slide. First of all, you know, they actually make this statement in the letter that you love, the same post that I was showing you before. What is the over-under of done in 30 months from March 27th, 2018? So before we go any further, let's do that one, okay? So I clicked on that link that they gave us, and it goes to September 29th, 2020. Okay. That obviously has already passed. That is before the election ever took place. And that in and of itself is not that noteworthy. The 30 days is interesting. The 30 months, okay, 917 days. But now look at the next thing here. So first of all, what is the over-under of done in 30 months? And again, that might have nothing to do with it. It might be a red herring. But then look at this. What is the over-under Sullivan retires, steps down by March 2021, based on public info regarding possible coordinated efforts with OSC Mueller? March 2021. Well, isn't it interesting, folks, that March 2021 is only less than 2 weeks away from 30 days after the inaug. Wow. And to me, you know, oh, David, you're grasping at straws. Really? Wait a minute. Let's go back and look at, again, the rest of this quote. Okay, because here we are. They're giving you the date of March 2021, but let's not forget that right before that, so first of all, here's the whole thing, right? So it's 4770, and you can see the text at the bottom there. What is the over-under done in 30 months? Obviously, that date is not that significant. And then March 2021 is the other date. So March 2021 is in a post in which they're mentioning General F, and they're mentioning done in 30, house cleaning, White House secured, final stage. And they immediately reference March 2021. As far as I know, nobody else has seen this yet. it's very compelling that we might not be waiting that long, and the time window of March 2021 is extremely significant. If that was all the evidence we had, it might not be that compelling, but there's a heck of a lot more. So let's keep going. All right, so the next one I want to show you here is post number 26, and this weird numerical code that everybody thought they understood as being a reference to the date of the election. It really apparently is not. And this is something that Dave at X has done such a great job with. Think about it logically. The only way, and obviously this means the only way to solve the problem that we have, the only way is the military. There's no other way to do it. Fully controlled. And fully controlled, again, seems to mean that the whole situation is fully controlled, and we've now seen that, right? Every aspect of our system as Americans has failed. We're not getting the evidence. We're not getting the support. There's these outrages occurring. Jobs are being lost. Wars are being restarted. America's losing her independence. We're losing our access to our own energy. We're becoming dependent on foreign oil again. ISIS has suddenly popped up again. And you know, nobody's ever made so many executive orders as soon as they get in there. Over 30 executive orders have already been signed. Whether any of them will be honored or not remains to be seen. I don't think they will. I think this is all just part of the staging of what we need to see to get this Joan of Arc thing to happen. So back to the slide again. Think about it logically. The only way is the military. It is fully controlled. Save and spread this information once 11.3 verifies as the first marker. This is the biggest advanced drop we have ever given you on this board, which is called Paul. Now, save and spread this once 11.3 verifies as the first marker. Well, the first obvious sign is that 11.3 is a reference to Election Day. And that's the first marker. Well, it only just happened. 11.3 as the first marker only just happened, and the outcome wasn't even fully determined. I mean, we knew back then that they appeared to say, oh yeah, president-elect, right? We knew that. But it wasn't until January 20th that the whole thing was completed, and now that's the real first marker. Like, whoa, okay, I get it. So back to the slide, and again they're saying, that, so the first marker has been verified. Save and spread this afterwards, right? So after this event takes place, then we want you to spread this message. Biggest advanced drop we've ever given. The only way is the military. So everybody thought that 11.3 only was a reference to Election Day, and as I'm going to show you with textual support here, that is not the case. 11.3 is very specific, and there's other codes related to it that I'm going to show you, and I think you're going to be blown away if you haven't already seen this, and I'm going to try to give it a little more depth of discussion than what I've been hearing when people bring this up until now. Another thing that Dave has been pointing out, which I'm very grateful for, is the post 521, back to the slide, in which they say that there is a necessary scare that we have to have. That is part of the Joan of Arc hero's journey thing. The scare is a necessary event. The scare in the case of Joan of Arc was her apparent death, which again in that case was real. Now we don't have a death, we have an apparent loss of an E, if you will. But it's a very big scare. It's a very frightening thing. And another one that Dave pointed out that I didn't actually get a picture of is the end will not be for everyone. Maybe I have it in here somewhere. But the end will not be for everyone. It's very upsetting, obviously. And once again, the Alliance is able to figure out who's going to remain loyal and who's going to break at the last minute and become, a betrayer. So the scare is a necessary event. Well, let's go back to that. This is 521. So here we go. We are fighting for life. We are fighting for good. We are at war. And then they have the @ sign, which again indicates it's an internet battle, because that's the middle of everybody's email address, right? So that's big tech. Not everything will be clean. Uh-oh. A scare will be a necessary event. Do you trust the U.S. military? Do you trust the chain of command? Have faith. We are in control. So they told us on January 13th, 2018 that there's a necessary scare event that's going to happen. All right, let's go on. And, this is another one of the outrages that I think is a little bit out of sequence, so I apologize for that. But somebody was replying to this tweet where they said, downtown D.C. is essentially under military occupation, and nobody in our bold adversarial watchdog media apparently finds this odd. Candace Owens then says, obviously she's a checkmark person, I live here and can confirm this is true. Something isn't right here. It honestly looks like they are setting up for a military coup, not an inog. Not sure why the most popular U.S. president-elect of all time, this still makes me laugh, requires dictator-grade protection. But again, let's make sure that we don't lose the thread here. We were on 521. It says we are at war with the @ sign, big tech, right? Not everything will be clean. There is a necessary scare event. Okay, but have faith. Do you trust us? And we are in control. It's going to be fine. So here's another one of these things that just made me laugh. Why do they need to state the obvious? I didn't know but what the former president was going to make some big bombshell announcement on this the day before the inaug. A lot of us were looking for this, but almost like you're too unintelligent to even be able to feed yourself. At the bottom it says, the Electoral College has confirmed JB is president-elect. States certify results after ensuring Bs are properly counted and correcting irregularities and errors. Learn more. Show me. Oh my God. If it is such a joke that they're so afraid that they have to tell you what to think and burn it right into the video, right? But wait a minute, there's enormous amounts of evidence from very credible, high-level sources that there's something seriously wrong here. Big tech thinks that they can just ban everybody, they can just shut everybody down. Why would they be stopping us from talking if there was nothing to see here, if there was nobody guilty and there was no crime? It doesn't make any sense. Why can't they be cool enough to allow me to make a video like this, or to allow all the others that are talking about this stuff to just talk? It's so ridiculous, folks. So for me, back to the slide, that day, the 20th, was a very, very bad day. I did not watch any of it. I could not handle it. I did at least have the stomach to go over to the sludge report, which is totally overrun by the enemy now, and take a picture of what they said. And it's so patronizing. In God he trusts. Oh, I'm so sure of that. The weird, creepy Bible isn't the least bit unpleasant, nor the fact that he lifted his hand off before he was done swearing. Democracy has prevailed. Really? How Orwellian. He takes the oath and calls for unity. Well, isn't that sweet? Yes, he's only trying to unify us, everybody. And then look at the sidebar. He's gone. Disgraced Donald flees to Florida. Right. That's all bias. Skips the inauguration in war-torn capital. He has an unwell appearance. And the nation is exhausted. On and on and on and on and on. Okay? So I saw this post where somebody started to connect the dots, and I wanted to actually share it with you just because it's pretty cool. Has a lot of details in it. So let's go through some of this. I'm going to zoom in on it piece by piece to make it a little easier to see. Okay. B cancels inaug practice due to security concerns, even though the capital is more secure than Iraq after it fell. That's a big question. Why are all these things happening? T is not attending the inaug, first time in 100 years for president. We went over that one. T taking the codes with him in Air Force One, first time in history. Capitol turned into a military compound, first time in history. T never mentioned the B administration in any of his farewell speeches. That's a first. Pompeo said there will be a smooth transition to another T presidency. This was a slip. Same thing that General F said. WH completely unsecured compared to the Capitol. Right. There's nobody guarding it because JB is not there. He's somewhere else. Layers upon layers of perimeter security within D.C., 30,000 armed National Guard. It's actually, according to Mike, it's more like 65,000. 2,300 of these armed National Guards deputized as U.S. Marshals. Let me stop right there. If you remember all the stuff that I've been talking to you about all these years about mass arrest, what's one of the things that I've been saying pretty much almost since 2009? That the arrests need to happen from U.S. Marshals. So when I see what I've now seen as much as 4,300 of them, at least it was over 4,000, of National Guard deputized as U.S. Marshals. That gives them arrest powers, which is exactly what we've always told you would need to happen. Why do you need 4,000 of them? Well, there's probably at least 4,000 people who need to be arrested in that area, and it's all being kept zipped up, right? So that's very, very interesting. Okay, the next one, 8-foot fence erected, then T orders all people to stay away from D.C. and not protest. Next day, there's a 12-foot fence erected with razor wire on the top. They clearly think somebody's coming and they don't want to let them in. B was crying as if it was a farewell and not a celebration. I did see articles about that. That makes sense. If he knew that it's going to be over really soon, he has no support from the military. It's all just a setup. B's family was nowhere to be seen at the inaug. Pence was nowhere to be seen. IFR tanker circling the Gulf just off the coast of Mar-a-Lago. Well, let's go real quick over to here. I looked this up just to be sure. I typed in IFR tanker, just see what I got. IFR is in-flight refueling. Okay, so now we go back there again. There is an in-flight refueling tanker circling the Gulf just off the coast of where the Winter White House is located, which T owns, has like 120 rooms or something. It's actually a lot more amazing than the White House. It's a really, really stunning, wonderful place, and it's a secure base of operations. So if there's an IFR tanker circling off the coast, in-flight refueling, what does this mean? This means that they are ready to take off on a moment's notice. In-flight refueling is what you do when you get a plane into the air and you don't ever want to land. So you refuel in the air. Well, the former president's own air support might need to be that he stays in the air when these things take place. They've said this from the very beginning, that he would be insulated and he would be in an airplane, which apparently was Air Force One, but he has his own version that he calls T-Force One. So the in-flight refueling explains that they are ready to act on a moment's notice for these arrests and get him airborne. Okay, got it. So back to the slide again. General Hyten revealing posts, and that one has now been discredited. It was not really him, and he's made public statements to that effect. I believe that. So disregard that one. Entire world knows the E was stolen. Evidence procured that T wins election. And then we have these 3 different laptops, Weiner, Clinton, Pelosi, 4 actually, B as well, all secured. Yes, and we cannot wait to see what's going to come out from all of these. Evidence that B was named in the Ukrainian court as corrupt and bribed. Not one single protester spotted in D.C. on the inaug day. You tell me what the F is happening. Okay. So the next thing I want to alert you to is that the word flood has been used along with drip. The flood refers to something that probably has not happened yet. So this is very interesting. This is 576. And so there's a previous one here where they're talking about a data dump from no such agency. Well, you look at the top 3 letters there, and you figure out that we know which agency they're talking about. There is a dump that is going to come out from this agency, which does not technically exist as open source. So we know what agency it's going to be. We know it's going to be a data dump. And then they responded, and again, this is January 21st now, the flood is coming from this data dump from this agency. The flood is coming. It will include emails, videos, audio, pictures, etc. FBI accidentally deletes texts. No such agency accidentally releases it all. Shall we play a game? The flood is coming. Okay, so what are they saying here? Let's just stay on this for a second. Emails, videos, audio, pics, etc. from no such agency, which accidentally releases it all. So this is a critical piece of information. 576 is a critical one because what is it saying? I want you to really not just get in a hurry for the next slide and listen to me on this, okay? They're bulk data collecting. They're bulk collecting everything. And they have video, they have audio, they have imagery, they have all this stuff. And what if it accidentally all gets released at the same time? That's what we're being told to expect. This is why Snowden wasn't pardoned, okay? Because that was an attack against this organization, which the alliance needed to have their own version of it to counteract other versions of it under separate control run by the DS. So with all of this in mind, this flood is going to be massive. It's going to be very upsetting. It's going to have tons and tons and tons of information, and it is unstoppable. So the question, it's not whether they have the data. They've had the data. The question is how to strategically release the data for maximum impact and to save our country. So if the DS is shutting down this thing that dominated our attention last year, now they're going to change the tests. Nobody's taking the shots, so they have to change it. That's good. If this horror show, if this collective nightmare can stop, I would be very happy. So here's the next thing. Back to the slide. Durham, I probably shouldn't keep saying that, I'll just say D, directly associated with the phrase, nothing can stop what is coming, and the flood. So let's go now to 3784. D-class is one of the things we've been waiting for, and apparently 1,000 pages of documents were just declassified, but we haven't gotten to see them yet. D-class chain of command. Starts with POTUS, then it goes to Barr, and then it goes to Durham. So Barr obviously has not been what we wanted. So now it's Mr. D here. So foreign classified intel provided. I assume the F is for foreign. Try to fix that. Sorry about the noise. I'm trying to fix my microphone. Classified intel provided, Five Eyes or non-Five Eyes as needed. Does D want to hold or freeze the public D class due to the criminal nature of the probes? That is the key line, folks. Let's read it again. Does D want to hold onto and freeze the D class due to the criminal nature of the probes? Think grand jury material. When did the investigation begin? When did the investigation really begin? Nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing. A slow drip will turn to a flood. Well, we already know that flood refers to this release of data from no such agency. And this is what they're calling the D class, the public D class. But then notice in that sentence I told you to pay attention to, does D want to hold and freeze the D class due to the criminal nature of the probes? Well, that's what's happened. The D class has been held and frozen. It hasn't happened yet, and we're after this alleged Nog thing has taken place. And it didn't appear to work out based on what most people thought was going to be happening with all these briefings and the idea that something would happen on that day. It obviously hasn't. But here's the thing. Back to the slide. This is so funny and cool. One of the last things that happened before our former president left is that he assigned him the role of a special prosecutor, and this means he cannot be fired. So he is the Punisher, and he is now in the White House as a special counsel. He is going to do his job, and he is going to, at the right time, pursue this investigation and release the information. Now that is very, very exciting. I do not expect that we are going to be disappointed in the least, and it really seems like now we're just waiting for whatever triggers there are for the amount of useful public indignation. Will it take until the summer or the fall? It's possible. I don't think so. I don't think so. And then there's this other thread of like the 30 days, and then when it says done in 30, and then they go March 2021. And White House secured, house cleaning. Okay, think about all this stuff. So Mr. D, who I was just showing you pictures of, they cannot fire him and they cannot stop him. And as soon as he announces what his investigation has concluded, it's over. It's over. And then that post that I just showed you said he's going to hold back on it due to the criminal nature, right? So let's just go back and look at that one more time. I'm sorry to keep doing this, but it's important. Does he want to hold and freeze this public D class due to the criminal nature of the probe? Think grand jury material. And when did the investigation begin? When did the investigation really begin? Well, the investigation really begins after the Joan of Arc moment, after it looks like all hope is lost. January 20th comes and goes. That's when the investigation really begins. That's what I'm interpreting this to mean. And therefore, he's freezing the D-class until after this happens. And it makes sense. This very likely has been the plan the entire time, and that's the way that it's always been going, and we just didn't know what was really going on. So back to the slide now. I want to take you back to 2018, January 21st. A whole lot of really interesting stuff happened at this time in these posts. Now we're at post 574, okay? And I'm going to zoom in on the part in the middle so we can see it and read it more easily. This is from Todd Mackler, and you see that the people he's emailing are Donna Brazil and our good old buddy John you-know-who. Rhymes with molesta. All right? And the subject is The Dogs Are Loose. It's an email from March 19th, 2016. So if you're hanging with this dude, it's not a good thing. If he's one of only two people in your to field of the email, that's not good. And look at what he's saying. This is right out of the wiki database, right? Hey guys, as you can see from the subject, the dogs are loose. I repeat, the dogs are loose. Loose dogs, guys, you know what to do from here. This is clearly code. Clearly code. And remember, it's 2016, so this is before the election was done. And this is the 2016 election, right? I'll be meeting with Soros later this week for some pre-programming of machines. Whoa. And then he says, but yeah, these machines will be humming in November. Just like I'll be humming a few Collective Soul songs. And he says, we're also going to check out a Collective Soul concert. Never knew George was a fan. Okay, so this is Collective Soul. And, just to give you the visual once again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these guys at all. Please don't blame the artists in cases like this. But again, back to where what he was saying in 2016. They were pre-programming machines, and they will be humming in November. So what we heard from briefings way back in the day is that those pre-programmed things were countermeasured, and that's why she lost in 2016, which they never expected. So we're going to learn about all this stuff. But again, this shows that even back then, they were onto this, they knew what was going on, and they talked about it in January of 2018. If it was done before, they knew it could be done again. This is the whole point that I hope you're going to be able to see from this. So back to the slide once more. This January 13th, a lot of stuff came in on this one day. And this is the one that I'd read to you before about the scare will be a necessary event and not everything will be clean. So again, let's read this. We are fighting for life. We are fighting for good. We are at war. Not everything will be clean. The scare is a necessary event. Do you trust the U.S. military? Do you trust the chain of command? Have faith. We are in control. Patriots. Patriots Day. What will the Patriots Day be? That's interesting, right? Is there going to be a day? Well, yeah, there will be. Have faith. You were chosen for a reason. You are being provided the highest level of intel to ever be dropped publicly in the history of the world. Use it, protect, and comfort those around you. Where we go one, we go all. Now, here's another thing that I want you to see. January 13th is 1.13, which is similar to 11.13. And a lot of stuff came out all on January 13th, 2018, which is interesting. So they're talking about that it won't be clean, that there's a necessary scare event that they have to manifest for us to get through this. And then on that same day that they're asking you, do you trust the U.S. military? Do you trust the chain of command? And they tell you to have faith, we are in control. A couple posts later, they say, you and your families are safe, promise. Again, January 13th. So they want us to be confident in this. Now the number codes, they've already showed us that number codes can be interpreted differently as what they really mean. This is going to go back to 11.3 here. But check this out. And again, it's December 13th, 12.13. So look at this. Not everything can be stated one-to-one. Letter can't come out and tell us exact meanings of his drops, likely because it would reveal information that would compromise operations as the scumbags scramble to clean up loose ends that are revealed. Hence the 1.2 millimeter mm, which we thought were 1.2 million normies reached by this board, when the 1.2 mm was actually the 1.2 million documents in the IG report, which the scumbags had no clue about. So then they responded by saying bad people watching. So this confirms that they need to hide data in numerical code. And they give a very specific example, which is 1.2. And they do it on the 13th of December, right? So 1.13. Now here's another thing that really confirms that they're going to need to speak in code. We won't telegraph our moves to the enemy. We will, however, light a fire to flush them out. Now, what does it mean to light a fire exactly? Well, if you allow this fake inaug to take place and you allow the people to be really angry, the necessary scare event they've just been speaking about, that's going to light a fire. And so that appears to be why Mr. D, who has got the investigation, I mentioned his name before, showed you his picture. That's apparently why he wanted to hold off the D class until after this takes place, because that's how they ignite this fire. And here's another drop from right around the same time. This is 3:45, and the person we were talking about the last time I did the show. And then we're just going to read the text first. I saw this in the last thread. Focus on the papers on the table. There's a graphic at the top. They all belong to the same sick cult/club. Image at the top, boy/girl, enhance. What else do you see? Archive. Watchers will now erase this from the web. So I went back and I looked at it, and it is really strange and really disturbing. Now, first of all, I looked at the papers like they said. I can't read any of this, so I'm not able to make any sense out of this. If you have any ideas as to what we're seeing there that I might not see, by all means leave a comment. I don't know. But this is the part that's really, really disturbing, folks. Because clearly it's a picture of Honey Boo Boo, the girl that was in the beauty pageant. It's a cardboard cutout that stands up. It's got a real pink tutu that's actually three-dimensional and physical. You can see it casting a shadow on the wall. So the tutu part is actually full. But then notice that she's making a strange hand gesture, first of all, and her face is deathly white. Her skin is like she's dead. And the eyes are all black. Now, why in the world would you want to put up this image of what looks like a dead child and then hang around and get your work done in that room? Well, you do the math, you speculate as you will, but that's just something they wanted us to think about. Again, this is really funny, where they say, this is post 339, we have a special place picked out for GS, and that's, of course, the guy whose name sounds like Soros or something like that, you know who it is. Really special place picked out for him. So, yeah, he's going to have some interesting accommodations, I guess. So then it says, Letter has asked about ownership of V machines before. They knew GS was going to mess with the numbers. This was the plan. Okay, and they flagged this by reposting it. So they knew about the V machines. They knew he was going to mess with the numbers. And this, again, is in 2017, December. Only a couple months after it even started, going right back to the beginning, right? A very special place. What would be the penalty for stealing E's? And think about it. Don't you need the crime to actually be carried through? Because if they didn't actually allow it to happen, then there would be always plausible deniability. Well, we didn't really intend to do that. You guys are misinterpreting that. We're not really saying we were going to steal anything. No, once you've actually done it, even though the military isn't supporting it at all, and you can see that through a number of these anomalies, it's still a completed crime. It got done. And here they are back in December 2017, just because it only started on like Halloween, or a couple days before Halloween. So that's October 31st, right? So November, it's really only like a month and a half after it started. And already right there, you have this post where they're saying he's going to mess with the numbers. They knew this. They've picked it out where he's going to be going and what would be the penalty for stealing E's. Amazing. Amazing. They knew from the beginning. Okay, that's my argument. Back to the slide. 4494 is another big one that we really need to look at here. And this was June 22nd of 2020. Is this about the V or the E? Manipulated P's meant to legitimize rigged E results. Well, we saw that. That's definitely happening. The E was not rigged. All the P's demonstrated B's clear lead across the country. That would be one example. What happens if C successfully duplicates, clones, select B's in battleground states? Well, that's some of the evidence that's already come out if you were following all that stuff, folks. they did successfully duplicate and clone selected bees in battleground states. What happens if coordination exists with select states to deliver printing and paper bee recipes, secrets to select foreign adversaries? They have nothing to lose? Logical thinking. So again, let's just stay on this for a second. And this is absolute proof that they knew exactly what was coming. They saw it coming. And they were showing you that it's going to be about the election. And they need to discredit any arguments to the contrary. Apparently the plan always was at least a strong likelihood that it would be allowed to carry through unless they could get it done earlier. And maybe they always intended for it to be this way. So now I want to really drill in on that 11.3 because there's many, many examples of this. And I'm going to try to do them chronologically now. So this is the first one. This is only post number 15. And if you want to read all the bottom, you can. I'm going to go back to just the top here, and this is the really important part. There are more, for me, for what I'm doing right now, there are more good people than bad. The wizards and warlocks, this is an inside term, I guess for their own team members, they will not allow another satanic evil piece of crap to control our country. Realize Soros, Clinton's, Obama, Putin, etc. are all controlled by 3 families. We don't really know what these families are, but one probably is Rock, one is Roth, and I'm not sure what the third one is, honestly. But Rock and Roth, I think, are pretty obvious. The 4th was removed after Trump's... We have no idea who that family is yet. Now, this is very strange. 11.3, P indicted. 11.6, Huma indicted. Well, none of those things happened. None of those things happened. They appeared to represent dates. Those dates were in the future because this was October 31st, 2017. Those dates were only like, the first one was only 4 days away or 3 days away. Nothing happened. So, and then it's not only 11.3, it's also 11.6. And I just showed you that they confirmed that they need to use numerical codes. The 1.2 million thing actually had something to do with the IG report, and nobody knew what it meant. And they said, we can't really be honest about everything we're saying because the bad guys are watching, right? So these are codes. The 11.3, 11.6, they're not dates. Nobody was indicted. These events are different than that. And what we're going to see in just a minute here is that there's a very clear line of reasoning for what these codes actually translate as. And if you haven't seen this before, hopefully this will amaze you. So again, it says the corruption that will come out is so serious that deals must be cut for people to walk away. Otherwise, 70% of elected politicians would be in jail. And you are already seeing this begin. A deep cleaning is occurring, and the prevention and defense of pure evil is occurring on a daily basis. They never thought they were going to lose control of the presidency, not just Democrats, and thought they had control since making past mistakes, like with JFK and Reagan. Goodspeed, Patriots, PSS is targeted. Okay, so we had the 11, just to be clear again once more, and I'm sorry to keep beating this in, but 11.3, 11.6. These dates came and went, nothing happened, no indictments took place, so it clearly refers to something else. It's a code. So, then we get November 1st, which is now 2 days away, post 25. Follow up to the last post. Return to comments R.E.P. and John M. Some of us refuse to say his last name for a reason. And this again refers to the idea that McCain, the word Cain, goes all the way back to the Bible, and these people in the DS believe they are the bloodline of Cain. And they take that to mean the bloodline of Lucifer. So, as I've said before, when Hillary was running in 2016, her running mate's name was Cain, spelled K-I-N-E. That is totally not a coincidence. And you have McCain running with, oh my gosh, what was her name? Sarah Palin, right? So, yeah, this name pops up a lot. And it's like saying Jesus to them. So they said right here, some of us refuse to say his last name for a reason. Now look at this. This all has meaning. Back to the slide now. She's about to sneeze. This all has meaning, everything stated. Big picture stuff. Few positions allow for this direct knowledge. Proof to begin 11.3. Well, that's only it appeared to be only 2 days away, but then again, of course, nothing happened. So they're saying this all has meaning, everything that we state, and there's other meanings. Obviously, that means there's layers. This is big picture stuff, and you're getting direct knowledge. Proof to begin 11.3. We all sincerely, and remember, the other post had said that it had to do with indictments of John P. on 11.3 and then Huma on 11.6, or so we think. We all sincerely appreciate the work you do. Keep up the good fight. This flow of information is vital. God bless. Now here's another one. This is the one I showed you before. 11.3. This is post 26, which is like literally the next one after 25. So post 26, now it's going to make more sense, folks, or it starts to make more sense. I read this to you before. Think about it logically. The only way is the military. It is all fully controlled. Save and spread once 11.3 verifies as the first marker. This is the biggest advanced drop on poll. 11.3 appears to be election day, but it's really not. There's something else going on, and it has to do with the military defense manual, the DoD's own manual. And here's another one that shows this might not be just a statement about the election, okay? Why is that? This is 4524, and we're going to see this tweet in just a minute. I'm going to show you the tweet. Good catch. Coincidence? Important that people understand this, what you're about to see, for future events. And this was in June 2020, so it's not that long ago, okay? Is it assumption or is it intel-based? All assets, foreign and domestic, have been deployed. And this is, again, the DS that's doing this. Now, are they giving you intel or is it just an assumption? Well, it's important that people understand for future events. Well, we have to see what is it they're talking about that's either assumption or intel-based. But then look at this. Democrats plus the country starting with C equals 11.3. Once again, it suggests the election, and it suggests that they know something's going down with these actors colluding. And again, they give us this weird code. Is it only election day? No, it definitely is not. So they said, good catch. Is this a coincidence? It's important you understand this for future events as of June 2020. Future events. So let's see what that post is. Well, this is how I first started to find it. I had to look it up on DuckDuckGo. And this is what it says. Democrats colluding with C to steal the 2020 PE on November the 3rd, or that's how they interpreted it, right? Same post. Well, then I was able to click on this little folder link. You see on that link there, that's the Twitter link, that on the far right, there's a little blue folder icon. Well, I clicked on that, and this is what I got. And then I was actually able to see the tweet because it's long since been deleted. And so we're going to break this down piece by piece. So first of all, T-Dog here says, this is a letter proof at POTUS where the quote is, especially C, are they going to print millions of bees on the exact same paper using the exact same machines? Well, remember, this is June 2020, and they're already anticipating this. This is all there, folks. It's already there. And then this is the actual post of 4494 that she was linking to in her tweet. So this is also important. And back when it was on qmap.pub, that particular site, which no longer exists, it said, are C and other foreign adversaries printing/cloning paper bees to cheat the 2020E. Now I'm going to zoom in on it even more. Is this about the V or the E? Manipulated P's meant to legitimize? We already talked about, I already read this one to you. What happens if C successfully duplicates select B's in battleground states, right? So that's what she was linking to, okay? So backing up again here, and then she links to this by saying, right here again, this is the proof, right? So then we go back a little bit further once more, and remember that they linked to this, okay? So now we know what this is. It's all about interference. And then they said, it's important you understand this for future events as of June. Is this an assumption or is this intel based? Well, they're obviously telling you this is not an assumption. We have intel. We know what they're going to try to do. They've deployed all assets, and they're going to use, the Dems are going to use this with the country starting with C, and it relates to 11.3. So they gave you all this together. 11.3 is a critical code in understanding this whole frickin' thing that they're talking about right here. And then we looked at this one already. Now, we're going to go to the next instance of the code of 11.3 and 11.4. Now remember that originally they used 11.3 as if to say that Mr. P was going to be indicted on that day, but look at this. This is November 1st, 2017, just a couple days after it started, number 34. My fellow Americans, over the course of the next several days, this of course was disinformation or it just didn't happen, you will undoubtedly realize that we are taking back our great country, the land of the free, from the evil tyrants who wish to do us harm and destroy the last remaining refuge of shining light. On POTUS's order, look at this, folks, we have initiated certain fail-safes that shall safeguard the public from the primary fallout, which is slated to occur 11.3 upon the arrest announcement of Mr. P, actionable 11.4. Now that's weird, right? Because it says confirmation of the public of what is occurring will then be revealed and will not be openly accepted. Public riots are being organized in serious numbers in an effort to prevent the arrest and capture of more senior public officials. On POTUS's order, a state of temporary military control will be instituted, and then it says that he's going to be on AF1, blah, blah, blah. We have all that. You can go back and look at that one. But again, it said the primary fallout, which is slated to occur 11.3. It does not say slated to occur on 11.3 or on the date of. It just says occur 11.3, and then it says actionable 11.4. And then I'm going to again remind you about this one, where it's showing 11.3 related to D and the country starting with C. And then there's yet another weird example of this that doesn't appear necessarily to be related to an actual date, because now we have a placeholder for indictments, the non-civil or non-civic indictments. Set 1, number 1, Kevin C, or KC here. And so they're giving you the acronym. And again, placeholder for indictment tracking. So this particular, that's one of the other things that was really strange, right? Is that we were told there were going to be a whole bunch of indictments, and then they only got KC and they left everybody alone. But it just puts in brackets 11.3 as if 11.3 is somehow related to these arrests. And again, you could say, well, yeah, it's just election day. But then why would they say that the arrest of Mr. P on 11.3 is actionable 11.4? And they didn't say on those numbers, they just give the numbers. Well, this is another strange example of 11.3 showing up in 4621. Associated with the arrest of this person. So let's dive into this a little more here. Back to the slide. Kevin C to plead guilty in the D probe, read the charging document. So that's what they were linking to. When you click on that, or no, they didn't. I looked this up myself. I'm sorry. There's no link to this in this particular post. So it says here in the text of this document, former FBI lawyer Kevin C will plead guilty to making a false statement in the first criminal case arising from the U.S. Attorney John D's review of the investigation into links between R and the 2016 T campaign, according to two sources close to the matter. Read the charging document from the Justice Department below. Okay, so now we know that this is clearly related to the D report, the D investigation, the attorney whose last name starts with D, right? We showed you his picture. And then they also told us in those posts that they need to withhold most of it, that they decided to wait for the flood. So then 11.3 is directly associated with the first of these arrests. But what are the arrests, what is this investigation apparently going to tell us? We've gotten lots of leaks on this, lots of drops on this. The investigation started as being about Russia, apparently, but it expands into what really happened in 2016 and who really was doing things, and it becomes this massive conspiracy actually to attack the former president, which is illegal, to stalk him, to harass him, to set him up, to make up all these false things, and it's going to be one indictment after another, and all this stuff comes rolling out. 11.3. What the heck does that mean? Well, before we get to that, because I'm going to reveal it soon enough. Let's go back to the slide again. This is the final, the main thing that he testified to. And again, he was found guilty. Nobody's denied this, right? So this means all these charges are going to stick, or at least many of them will stick. On or about June 19th, 2017, within the District of Columbia, the defendant, Kevin C., did willfully and knowingly make and use a false writing and document, knowing the same to contain a materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statement and entry in a manner before the jurisdiction of the executive branch and judicial branch of the government of the United States. Specifically, on or about June 19th, 2017, the defendant altered the OGA liaison's June 15th, 2017 email. Okay, I'm done. Sorry. Anyway, there he is. There's his signature. I think we're going to be seeing this signature a lot more on a lot more documents, and I'm really excited about that. So, what does 11.3 really refer to? Well, Dave at X Report has really cracked this one, and I got to give him full credit for this. I would never gotten this without him. It is a direct section of the Department of Defense Law of War Manual. And here is an image of the book cover of this. Now, what is the Law of War Manual per se? It is based on the Geneva Convention. All countries in the world, whether they're allies or not, there is a universal international agreement for the Geneva Convention. That's what it is. It is a regulatory set of legal proceedings decided on by the international community in Geneva, Switzerland, whose purpose is to prevent war crimes. So a very simple example is that the Geneva Convention outlawed chemical and biological warfare, theoretically, right? Theoretically, you can't release a pathogen as a weapon. Nobody's allowed to do that. You can't, in World War I, we had this horrible thing with mustard gas, and they decided that chemical, biologicals, all that kind of stuff is way too crazy, way too dangerous, way too ugly. It is automatically forbidden by the international community. So if you do this, if you violate the Geneva Convention, international law not only allows for, but it mandates that the international community will intervene, and make arrests and stop this thing from happening. So when you violate the Geneva Convention, you are setting yourself up for a direct intervention from foreign powers to ensure that the rule of law internationally is upheld. So then the Department of Defense took those principles from the Geneva Convention and wrote their own document, their own set of guidelines that are fundamentally based on international law, and then they codified it into an American law, the law of war. Any country that we would have a theater of operations in, any country where there would be potential disruptive activities, war that we would be involved in or that somebody else is involved in, these are the guidelines that determine how the military is going to handle a situation. And so what we see over and over again is the reiteration of 11.3, 11.3, 11.3 in these strange ways. And it's convenient that it happens to be election day, but there's clearly other stuff going on. Huma indicted 11.6. P indicted 11.3, actionable 11.4. These refer to passages in the Law of War Manual. And what's cool about it is that it's not like you're reaching at all. It's very obviously correlated to all the posts that I just showed you. So let's start now, back to the slide, with the end of section 11.2. Because what you're going to see here is that this whole thing has to do with an occupying power. An occupying power. A foreign, adversarial, probably adversarial, but either way, a foreign occupying power that has seized control of a domestic government. That's what it is. The whole section 11 is all about this. So clearly, with all these things that they're talking about, foreign interference on elections, 11.3, and they talk about, the first placeholder, the Cayce arrest that we just showed you, right? The Kevin, they put the 11.3 after it, and they say D's plus the country starting with C is 11.3. And then there's the 11.4 and 11.6. What's going on? These are all sections of the war manual. The laws that apply to a foreign power occupying your country. So they're telling you that's what's going to be happening. That's what they're going to allow to happen, folks. They had to keep it secret. They couldn't tell anybody. And they probably needed to put out all this disinformation to make it look like they were going to do something before then to trigger the enemy into acting out of fear and paranoia. And it really freaking worked. They did all kinds of crazy stuff. But yet, if they had known that they were just going to be allowed to coast right in, then they never would have done all these mistakes. They were so afraid of something that was about to happen. It was a huge bluff, the ultimate poker bluff, right? There's all this military there. They sure as hell thought something was going to happen, and it didn't. But if you really go back and look, this is all part of the plan, folks. And so we're not off script at all. We're totally on. So now let's unpack this 11.2, 11.3. And I'm not going to read everything, but I want you to see it so you could read it and pause if you want to. But I'm just going to read highlights. Here we go. So they said in 11.2, there is no specific legal requirement from the Geneva Convention that an occupying power issues a proclamation that they are doing a military occupation. Well, there you go. There's been no proclamation other than, hey, we won the election. Well, maybe, maybe not. The question of whether a territory is occupied does not depend upon the issuance of any particular proclamation or other instrument. A territory may be occupied even though no proclamation of occupation has been issued. There you go. Conversely, the issuance of proclamation... Okay, so it also says a proclamation may help to fix the date of the beginning of the occupation. The proclamation may also advise inhabitants of the occupied territory of the rules that they must comply with. In particular, proclamation may be used to advise inhabitants of changes to law, including penal law. But they don't have to tell you that's what they're doing. They can just go in there and do it. Then, this is the very end of 11.2, the general practice of the United States has been to make the fact of occupation known by a proclamation or similar notice. This is a general practice. Doesn't mean they do it all the time. So there could be an occupation without any proclamation, even within the U.S. In addition to giving notice to the inhabitants of occupied territory, notice may be given to other governments. In some cases, the UN Security Council has recognized the fact of occupation. Now here we get into the absolutely critical code from their own manual, which again, this is like the Bible for them. They're reading this all the time. So don't think for a minute that this 11.3 thing means nothing. It totally does. 11.3, end of occupation and the duration of Geneva Convention obligations. And look at this, it's a belligerent occupation. That means that there's hostility involved and it's not being done with the consent of the people who are being occupied. That's the critical thing, folks. They were going to allow this to happen as a belligerent occupation. The status of belligerent occupation ends when the conditions for its application are no longer met. Certain Geneva Convention obligations with respect to an occupied territory continue for the duration of the occupation after the general close of military occupations. And then 11.3.1, belligerent occupation ceases when the conditions for its application are no longer met. Blah, blah, blah. It ceases when the invader no longer factually governs the occupied territory. There is no governance going on if you can't control the military, by the way. Think about that. You can't do anything. Or when a hostile relationship no longer exists between the state of the occupied territory and the occupying power. That's not going to happen here. Belligerent occupation ends when the occupying power no longer has effectively placed the territory under its control. For example, an uprising by the local population may prevent the occupying power from actually enforcing its authority over the territory. An uprising. That's what they're telling us they want now. This is all part of the plan, folks. Similarly, the occupying power's expulsion or complete withdrawal from the territory would also suffice, because the former occupying power generally would not be able to control sufficiently the occupied territory if they were expelled or withdrew. Belligerent occupation also may end when a hostile relationship no longer exists between the occupying power and the state. And then you can go on and read the rest of that. 11.4, now remember, what did it say before? Now I want you to go back to some of the drops. 11.3, P indicted. 11.6, which we're going to get to that section soon enough. H indicted. But 11.3 was actionable. 11.4, they associated the Cayce, the first arrest in the D investigation, as 11.3 also. And then they also had the 11.3 code of D's and the country starting with C. So it clearly has to do with what happened on November 3rd, but it also clearly is a reference to this manual. So if people like John P., who they said would be indicted on the 3rd, if this is relating to belligerent occupation, well, John P. was one of the people in the team of Hillary who's obviously very related to what's going on right now and who's been inauged since then. So, if the indictment of P, John P, is related to 11.3, they said actionable 11.4. So what is 11.4? Let's take a look at that now. 11.4 is the legal position of the occupying power. Military occupation of enemy territory involves a complicated trilateral set of legal relations between the occupying power, the temporarily ousted sovereign authority, and the inhabitants of occupied territory. The fact of occupation gives the occupying power the right to govern enemy territory temporarily, but look at this, in Geneva Convention rules, it does not transfer the control and the sovereignty over that occupied territory to the occupying power. So this means that even if they try to do it, they don't actually have control. 11.4.1, it says, the right to govern the territory of the enemy during its military occupation is one of the incidents of war. By the fact of occupation, i.e., the occupying power's established power over occupied territory, the occupying power is conferred to exercise some of the rights of sovereignty. Okay. The exercise of these sovereign rights also results from the necessity of maintaining law and order, which is indispensable both to the inhabitants and to the occupying force, and the failure or inability of the legitimate government to exercise its functions or the undesirability of allowing it to do so. So 11.4.1 means that you need to still give people their rights, even when they're under occupation. They need to have law and order. And actually it says elsewhere in these sections there needs to be a period of time for the occupying power to allow itself to be in power, for this to be happening by Geneva Code, so that the people aren't as disrupted when this happens, that there's a little bit of time given for the occupying power to stay there. 11.4.2, going back to the slide, limitations on the power of the occupying power stemming from its lack of sovereignty over the territory. Belligerent occupation in a foreign war being based upon the possession of enemy territory necessarily implies that the sovereignty of the occupied territory is not vested in the occupying power. Occupation is essentially provisional, meaning it doesn't last. Because sovereignty is not vested in the occupying power, the fact of military occupation does not authorize the occupying power, which is now what's been going on since the 20th, to take certain actions. Okay, let's see what these actions are they can't take by Geneva law. For example, the occupying power is not authorized by the fact of belligerent occupation to annex occupied territory or to create a new state. Well, they've already annexed basically this whole DC area, and they created a military fortification, so that doesn't look good. In addition, the occupying power may not compel the inhabitants of the occupied territory to become its nationals or otherwise to swear allegiance to it. They've already face-planted on that one, because supposedly swear allegiance to your commander-in-chief, right? Well, that's not happening. The military's not doing that. Similarly, in view of the provisional nature of belligerent occupation, the authority of the occupying power under occupation law has been interpreted as being subject to limitations on the ability of the occupying power to alter institutions of government permanently or change the Constitution. Well, they're already doing that with the EOs, executive you-know-what. Now, 11.5, they didn't really talk about that much, so we're not going to spend a lot of time dealing with that one, but it's the duty of the occupying power to ensure public order and safety. And the authority of the legitimate power, having in fact passed into the hands of the occupying power, the latter shall take all measures in its power to restore and ensure public safety. And then it says, the duty to respect unless absolutely prevented, I skipped a little bit, the duty to respect unless absolutely prevented the laws in the force in that country has been interpreted not to apply to local administrative laws such as regulations, executive orders, ordinances, and decrees. So that's interesting because it looks like they might have a loophole where you can pass executive orders without bending the laws. But again, I don't think it's really going to go that far. Now we get to 11.6. Now, let's remember that it was P indicted 11.3, H indicted, Huma, 11.6. Now, Huma, in this case, if you've studied all this, she was working very closely with Hillary, last name Abedin, of course. And so she was also married to the guy who produced the laptop, Anthony, and you know what his last name sounds like. His last name's Weiner. So, and it appeared that there was a very contentious relationship between the owner of the laptop and Huma. But a lot of the drops that we've been referring to by numerical code, they said that she is a member, H is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood of all things. So that would imply that there is a secret collusion going on between the Dems, what would be the current administration, and this Brotherhood. And that apparently goes deep enough to include the financing, which is one of the other things that drops, and other intel I've had for a long time, the financing of the very groups that were supposed to be fighting. So isn't it strange that as soon as this inaug takes place, all of a sudden ISIS is a thing again, and all of a sudden we got to go back to the Middle East, and all of a sudden he wants to cut off the pipeline. He doesn't want independence. We got to become codependent with the Middle East again. We need wars to happen there again. This is nonsense. So 11.6 is a section of the Law of War Manual that relates to what would happen if somebody running for president in 2016 is working with a person who's directly coordinating with this Muslim group, which apparently is just a thin veneer for collusion with the groups that we're supposedly fighting. So now what you have is treason, where there's a collusion, there's a hidden agreement between these people who are supposedly acting on our best interests as our leaders and the people that they're supposedly protecting us from, telling us there's a war on this stuff, telling us that we got to spend money on making sure this war doesn't happen, right? That's 11.6. So the indictment of Huma is directly related to this underlying instance of the foreign collusion, the foreign involvement, and the involvement of literally sleeping with the enemy, financing the enemy, building the enemy, giving the enemy everything. It's all this order out of chaos, the problem, reaction, solution, all this stuff they do, right? So now that we've seen that the indictment of H is related to 11.6, just like the indictment of P is related to 11.3 and 4, and I've showed you how this has to do with belligerent occupation of a foreign entity in a sovereign territory. And there's all these rules about how they have to do it. So these people are breaking these rules left and right, if you haven't already figured that out. Now that we've seen the Muslim connection, let's go to 11.6. Protection of the population of an occupied territory, which is not happening if your leader is colluding with ISIS, right? Under the law of belligerent occupation, the occupying power has certain duties with respect to the population of an occupied territory, including protected persons under the Geneva Convention. 11.6.1, there are general protections including humane treatment of the population of an occupied territory. This is really important, so I am going to read some of this. The population of an occupied territory, like other protected persons under the Geneva Convention, are entitled in all circumstances to respect for their persons, their honor, their family rights, their religious convictions and practices, and their manners and customs. How would this work out if you stop everybody from being able to say anything that goes against your agenda? How would this work? It doesn't work. You're violating the Geneva Convention. That's the point. You're not protecting the people. You're not protecting their persons, their honor, their family rights, their religious convictions and practices, their manners and customs. None of that is happening. Our rights are being trampled, which means by definition this is a violation of international law. And one of our main sources is not in the U.S., it's NATO. It's the alliance. The alliance is much bigger than the U.S., folks. And there's international laws protected under the Geneva Convention that must be followed. And if they are not, it is the responsibility of the international community to enforce the Geneva Convention. So don't think that these actions are only going to involve the U.S. and its military. They're not. Because everybody is afforded the basic protection, even under hostile foreign occupation. They are still protected by law of their persons, their honor, their family rights, religious convictions, practices, manners, and customs. And then I'm going to read more now, so back to the slide. They shall at all times be humanely treated and shall be protected especially against all acts of violence or threats of violence and against insults and public curiosity. Now, were we protected against all acts of violence or threats of violence? Absolutely not. Because apparently on the laptop belonging to Nancy, you're going to learn that there's a lot of stuff in there where she was actually allowing people in, that it was their guidance and direction. Therefore, people are not being protected. Therefore, 11.6 is being violated, just like it would be, again, if your leader is trading with the enemy, in this case, Muslim enemy. Back to the slide. Other provisions for the humane treatment of protected persons set forth in Articles 27 through 34 of the Geneva Convention apply to the population of an occupied territory. For example, women must be especially protected against any attack on their honor, in particular against rape, enforced prostitution, or any form of indecent assault. Well, that's not been going on for a very long time. So there again, they're in violation. Reprisals against protected persons and their property are prohibited. Well, this is already happening. There's reprisals against people's property, the property of your platform. You know, people are being canceled. They're losing their businesses. All this kind of stuff is happening. The taking of hostages is prohibited. Again, let's go a little bit more here. In addition, well, we don't really need to read that part about the Red Cross. 11.6.2, additional protections for the population specific to occupation. There's a number of protections for the population of an occupied territory that are specific to occupation. For example, a specific provision exists for the protection of children in the occupied territory. Well, that's not frickin' happening if everything they're accusing these people of doing is true. Specific, and again, look at the indictment, HUMA, right? What does that relate to? Crimes against children, same kind of thing. There you go. Specific constraints exist on the authority of the occupying power to punish protected persons, direct their movement, they have constraints on this, or compel them to perform labor. Provision also is made to provisions are also made with respect to food and medical supplies for the population, public health and hygiene, spiritual assistance, and relief efforts and consignments. Well, a lot of this stuff has been damaged or completely destroyed. Food and medical supplies, of course, there's a lot of questions around that. You're not allowed to do anything with the medical supplies. You're not allowed to mess with public health. You're not allowed to mess with people's spirituality, which they are doing. They're banning everybody, and relief efforts must not be blocked. And then they have an additional provision in which it says it is forbidden to compel the inhabitants of an occupied territory to swear allegiance to the hostile state. Well, they're trying to do that right now. No general penalty, pecuniary means financial. So no general penalty, financial or otherwise, shall be inflicted upon the population on account of the acts of individuals for which they cannot be regarded as jointly and severally responsible. Well, the financial collapse appears to have been engineered, and therefore that is a financial penalty. So once again, violation of the Geneva Convention. Such penalties are prohibited even if authorized under the laws of the occupied territory. Collective penalties are prohibited as a general matter. And then they have a duty to respect the rights of the protected persons secured by the Geneva Convention. Protected persons in the occupied territory shall not be deprived in any case or any manner whatsoever of the benefits of the Geneva Convention by any changes introduced as a result of an occupation of a territory into the institutions or government of that territory. That's the bottom line there. So you cannot break any of these Geneva Convention rules. Of course, they're being broken like crazy. And the occupying power may not enter the occupying power may not enter into any special agreements that would adversely affect the situation of protected persons. We already saw that one before. And so we don't really need to read a whole lot more of this. Citizens of neutral states residing within an occupied territory are generally treated the same as other residents of an occupied territory. Okay. So now I want to really drill into this even more. This is post 34. So now that we've seen all this, let's review. My fellow Americans, over the course of the next several days, you will undoubtedly realize, and of course they're talking about the present, so this is time-stamped to the present. Not that it's going to happen in only several days, it could take longer. But when it happens, you will undoubtedly realize that we are taking back our great country, the land of the free, from the evil tyrants who wish to do us harm and destroy the last remaining refuge of shining light. On POTUS's order, we have initiated certain fail-safes that shall safeguard the public from the primary fallout that is slated to occur 11.3. Well, hold on. 11.3 by definition is in the Department of Defense Law of War Manual, and they are fail-safes to guard the population against a belligerent occupying power. So there you go. And it doesn't say on 11.3, it just says slated to occur 11.3. So slated to occur means they know there's going to be this belligerent occupation. And then the arrest doesn't happen until after they allow this to take place. On Election Day, 11.3 is when it starts. So back to the slide. On POTUS's order, we have initiated certain fail-safes that shall safeguard the public from the primary fallout slated to occur 11.3 upon the arrest announcement of Mr. P, actionable 11.4. So it's actionable. The arrest of him is actionable because of that section 11.4 that again regards protecting people's human rights from the occupying power. Confirmation of the public of what is occurring will then be revealed. That's the present. It hasn't happened yet. They're talking about something that hasn't happened yet. They encoded it by making it look like it was a bad prophecy that was about to happen and then it didn't. It's about now. It's not about dates. It's about codes in the Law of War Manual, Geneva Convention. Confirmation of the public of what is occurring will then be revealed and will not be openly accepted. Public riots are being organized in serious numbers in an effort to prevent the arrest and capture of more senior public officials. We already saw that, so they knew that was going to happen. On POTUS's order, which has not occurred yet, a state of temporary military control will be actioned and special ops carried out. False leaks have been made. That's very important. They're telling you right there they have to release things that are not true. And in fact, some of the statements in this we now know were not true as well for their own protection. False leaks have been made to retain several within the confines of the United States to prevent extradition and special operator necessity. Rest assured, the safety and well-being of every man, woman, and child of this country is being exhausted in full. However, the atmosphere within the country will unfortunately be divided. Yes, they knew this was going to happen. As so many have fallen for the corrupt and evil narrative that has long been broadcast. Now look at this. We will be initiating the Emergency Broadcast System, EMS, during this time in an effort to provide a direct message avoiding the fake news to all citizens. That has yet to happen, but we're all anticipating it. And they had it right at the beginning, folks. Organizations and/or people who wish to do us harm during this time will be met with swift fury. Certain laws have been pre-lifted to provide our great military the necessary authority to handle and conduct these operations at home and abroad. And 11.3 and 11.4 are those laws. They're already giving you the code of the laws that they're going to be using to provide our military the necessary authority to handle and conduct these operations at home and abroad. And abroad. So what does 11.3 really mean? It appears to be this code about the belligerent occupying power, and they said right at the beginning they're going to need to free up these laws. Here's another post, yet again, that refers to 11.3, and this one is 4635. And it starts out by comparing a particular German flag with a particular flag that's being used now, and notice how similar they are. This is not an accident, folks. History repeats itself today regarding irregular warfare, regarding tactics being deployed versus America. Compare and contrast then versus now. Then there were methods of violent intimidation deployed by SA, which as you can see in the link was a particular organization in Germany during this time, basically like the elite troops, if you will. Now methods of violent intimidation being deployed by A. Then battles were raging in the streets. You had book burning, flag burning, destruction, hate, anti-police, etc. Now, battles raging in the streets controlled by D party sympathizers, anti-republic. Then, physical assaults of political opponents. Now, same thing. Then, voter intimidation in national and local elections. Voter intimidation. Now, same thing. Coming 11.3. Now, once again, why would they need to say coming 11.3? You know when the election day is. There's something more. It has to do with the intimidation of the occupying belligerent power. That's what they're talking about, folks. Then, project this platform, conform, obey, strong-arm tactics deployed to silence opposing views. Now they're going to do the same thing. Then they had a radical anti-capitalist platform, socialism. Now, same thing. Then they were forcing economic destruction by recruiting as a division tactic to drive enlistment rates. Now the D party gov mayors close states are forcing economic hardships through the C-19. There you go. Economic destruction. Then the SA carried out unchecked street violence against Jews and opponents. Now D gov mayors carried out unchecked, deliberate, non-prosecution orders, 24-hour release of rioters arrested. Street V, block-by-block takeover, right? D gov mayors release of violent criminals, many thousands, from prison under the guise of C-19. Once again, and then they give a link to propaganda here. Use of propaganda by NG, use of propaganda by MSDNC social media, control of the narrative, terminate the opposing message, censorship, kill. That's exactly what we're seeing. S history, assault on America. They knew all this was going to happen, folks. Ask yourself, why are D-Party leaders refusing to condemn the violence? Why are they refusing to seek a unified republic? It was never about the V, and it was always about the E. Was this party ever truly destroyed or eradicated? Did the belief carry on? Was it redeployed? And what is the background of good old George S.? Well, as we know, he was a sympathizer with them. There you go. Here's another one, 4587. C-19 narrative kill date, election day +1. That is exactly what seems to be happening. As soon as they get to this point, which again they were going to be allowed to, this is July 17th, 2020, they were going to be allowed to do this. They wanted you to see that the narrative would be shut down the day after, and that is exactly what I showed you at the beginning. Prepare for 0-day massive cyber power attacks and attempts on 11.4. Once again, this weird code. And again, the point is 11.4 has to do with the belligerent occupying power and the fact that they must not violate your civil rights. They have to obey the laws, they have to protect your dignity, and certainly by shutting down the power grid, they are not doing that. They are hurting you and they're in violation of the code. So if they shut the power grid down, and again, 11.4 would be like the day after the election day. That's not really when anything happened. It's the code, and it's saying that those cyber attacks violate the convention. So again, the legal evidence is all here. Why haven't they already done it? Because they need more people to be awake first. They needed the Joan of Arc moment. They needed the hero to actually appear to be dead. But I'm hoping that as I'm reading all this to you and you see how well it threads, these numerical codes, it's not coincidence. This is really what they wanted us to see, okay? And there's still more. Back to the slide, number 3814, the 30-day thing, right? Done in 30. And then it says, remember, this is what General F had just said, give me 30 days, and it was a quote from Washington. Why would F plead guilty to something that is untrue? Define testimony, define on record. Who knows where the bodies are buried? Obviously he does. F is safe, expand your thinking. Today is January, and then they put 30 in quotation marks. Coincidences are fun, thanks Department of Justice. Okay, so done in 30, and then the 30 in quotation marks. They say today is January 30th, and it's a coincidence. So again, they're basically saying there's going to be coincidences on these numbers, and the numbers might be different than what you think they mean. Well, we already have what the 30 days means, and the fact that it's directly associated with a post that flags March 2021, which is still in the future. So I want to do this one too. This is 2939, where they say, sometimes reading between the lines provides more information. Huber, this is the guy, the attorney from Utah, Huber says every one of the prosecutors is already handling about 20 cases. They range from domestic tea to court-authorized wiretaps of criminal organizations to child Ps and those who would exploit our children. Criminal aliens, big fraud schemes. So look at that. Big fraud schemes, criminal things associated with This stuff having to do with crimes against children, there you go, people who would exploit it. And every one of the prosecutors is already handling about 20 cases. Well, let's click on this and see how many prosecutors there are. There's 56 of them. So just at what they were willing to admit, and there's all these other teams that are doing the same thing, but just here alone, you have a total of 1,120 cases that we know of. Those cases, as it said, relate to crimes against children, criminal aliens, and big fraud schemes. 1,120 cases. So this is, again, the sealed indictment thing. It goes on, and there's so many of them. Huber just 56 people working on 20 at a time, and they're cranking them out. So they've done probably thousands and thousands just through his office alone. Many thousands. Because if they're only working on one at a time, or if they're only working on 20 at a time, and all they ever got done was 20, then that's still over 1,000. But if they're doing batches of 20, it could be a lot more than that, okay? Now here's the next thing I want to show you. This came again from Dave on the X Report. This very, very strange tweet the day after the inauguration, which is weird because he says 1,384 days. And then I actually went to my Twitter feed, which I still have, and took a picture of it. Notice he's got 141,000 likes. And I already showed you in the previous video about codes that he was making and dropping. And here's another one, because if you take this number, first of all, it is an interesting coincidence in the sense that it's exactly the amount of time before the next election that would be going on in, I guess, 2024. That doesn't really matter. That has nothing to do with what's going on. You could think, oh, well, it's only 1,384 days left before he can run again. That's not what it is. It's a code, because if you add an extra 8 to this, you get the executive order 13848, which you can see right here. I'm probably saying too many things out loud right now. The imposing of certain sanctions in the event of an interference in the United States E. And look at what it says right there. You can see the EO number, September 12th, 2018. Well, this is the EO that allows them to do all sorts of things. Everything that we've heard about the mass arrest scenario being is all covered under this. They can seize the assets of anyone who is involved in tampering with this. And that would include big tech. That would include the media. Seize the assets literally means occupying these facilities, folks. So there's a lot more that's getting ready to happen here than just whatever we're seeing in D.C. D.C. is like a magic trick, right? You got to look at the hand over here. You misdirect on this hand. Well, the other hand goes into the pocket and grabs something and pulls it out. You don't see this. You're always looking over here. You don't see this happening. I can't watch magicians because I'm always looking at their other hand and I see them grabbing their tricks, so it's because I studied magic. That was one of the things I wanted to learn about, is how do people do this stuff. Then Dave from X Report also had this one that's interesting. In addition to that weird code of 1,384 days that is directly related to the EO, which is what they're about to use to arrest people. Certain times when it seemed that there was just no hope, those are the times that turned out to be the best for me because I don't give up. So that is his philosophy. That is his belief system. It is the Joan of Arc thing again. When it seems there's no hope, when it seems it's all over, that's when he finds that that is the best for him because he doesn't give up, and it also flushes out the traitors. So this is all part of a structured thing. Well, we saw in the codes of Red 1 and then all the way through 6, these different things. This is another thing that I saw. This was on a different channel in this case. This was the RP78. The movement of military assets, the 10th Mountain Group, to central locations under the guise of citizen riot control. Well, sure enough, they're showing you here that this is exactly what happened. The exact division that they spoke about in that drop that I talked about in the previous show. Those are the guys that are actually out there with photographic proof. Now, this is the letter that the Joint Chiefs came out with when it was going forward with the inauguration not being what we thought and not leading any immediate arrests. It was so frustrating, but you got to read between the lines on this because they did not concede anything and they did not, there's a lot that you don't necessarily see here. So look at this. The American people have trusted the armed forces of the United States to protect them and our Constitution for almost 250 years. That's the first thing they said, that they will protect the Constitution, and they have done so for almost 250 years. They will protect the American people and their Constitution. That's very important, because the Constitution clearly does not allow you to do the stuff that we've just seen. As we have done throughout our history, the U.S. military will obey lawful orders, that is critical, from civilian leadership. And so obviously if an order is not lawful, they will not obey it. Well, if you're not there, if you're a belligerent occupying power, as Section 11.3 talks about, none of the orders are lawful. So they're basically saying if you figure it all out and do the homework like I'm doing now, they're not going to obey any of the orders, and that's exactly what we've seen. They had to put it in writing legally before they started doing it. Do you understand? They had to put it in writing that they're only going to obey lawful orders, and now what you're seeing is they're not cooperating at all. So clearly they don't see those orders as lawful. Let's continue here. They will obey lawful orders from civilian leadership, support civil authorities to protect lives and property, ensure public safety in accordance with the law, and remain fully committed to protecting and defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's the second sentence of the whole letter, ending with them saying, as we've done throughout our history, we are fully committed to defending the Constitution against domestic enemies. Why would they say that in the first paragraph, the second sentence? Because that's the whole point, folks. They're going to protect and defend the Constitution against domestic enemies. Whoever did it, the riot in D.C. on January 6th was a direct assault on the U.S. Congress Capitol building and our constitutional process. We mourn the deaths of the 2 Capitol policemen and others connected to these unprecedented events. So again, this is the really key part. They're fully committed to protecting against defending the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. And they will obey lawful orders. Then they say here, we witnessed actions inside the Capitol that were inconsistent with the rule of law. So whoever's responsible, obviously, if they already know, then those are not lawful orders, right? If that person is giving orders or that group is giving orders, it's not lawful. The rights of freedom of speech and assembly do not give anyone the right to resort to violence, sedition, and insurrection. As service members, we must embody the values and ideals of the nation. We support and defend the Constitution. Any act to disrupt the constitutional process is not only against our traditions, values, and oath, it is against the law. And so then they say, inauguration will be 46, da-da-da. To our men and women deployed at home, safeguarding our country, stay ready. Stay ready. Keep your eyes on the horizon and remain focused on the mission. What mission? What mission? What are they staying ready for? We honor your continued service in defense of every American, regardless of how they voted. So that's very, very big. So again, we're going to do this one. This is the last slide I've got for you, where it says, did he want to hold and freeze the D-class due to the criminal nature of the probe? Think grand jury material. When did it begin? When did it really begin? Nothing can stop what is coming. Nothing. A slow drip will turn to a flood. And we already saw them define flood as that. Back to the camera here. We already saw them define flood as the release of this information. So I rest my case. This concludes the intellectual portion of our show. And I would now like to directly launch us into a global peace meditation so I don't take any more of your time, because it's 9:30 my time, so it's already like 11:30 Eastern time. Sorry about that, but I did need to get through all this. Okay. Without further ado, so we don't have to take any longer, I want to manicure this particular meditation, not just for no violence, but for justice, okay? But also I want to really get you into the right frame here, because look at how much success we've had. Look at how little violence there's been. All these things that could have happened, and all we had was what happened on the 6th, and hardly anybody, just 4 people, I guess, died. That's about it. Maybe there's a few more now, but it's not very many. So with that in mind, here we are, and we've actually found ourselves in a situation that at first appears horribly upsetting, but they're still dropping these codes. They're still telling us things 11.3, 11.4, 11.6, and we know now what this means. We know that they had to let it happen this way. There was a decision made. One of the drops that Dave from X Report had talked about that I didn't get to was in 2018, where apparently the president himself made a decision at a particular point that this is how to proceed, and they went along with it. So this apparently is not new. So if you've been depressed, if you've been sad, if you've been angry, I hope now that with General F giving you a 30-day window, with the same 30-day window extending into March on that post that I showed you, and then all the other concomitant things, the new briefings that Mike is getting, where the latest we're going to have to wait is the summer or the fall. Please don't be like a whiny child and think, oh, this is never going to happen, it's never going to happen, it's never going to happen. Maybe it is the work of some higher benevolence that has led to it going down this way. There's been so little violence, and everybody needs to be on board. It would have been very traumatizing for a lot more people if they hadn't seen what this administration would do, if they hadn't seen how this was all going to turn out, if nature had just taken its course. All right. I hope you're a lot more optimistic now. I know I am, and I wanted to put all this together at once and really dig into this slowly and carefully so you see all the citations, all the quotes, how it all links together, the secret messages that are being given. We're being asked, please give us a little more time. Maybe it's not quite 30 days, might be a little longer. I want you to listen to these sources. I guess you have something you want to read to our audience? That's great.
Yeah, we'll just...
Don't forget to unmute yourself.
I believe I'm unmuted, yes.
Okay.
Just to transition the energy a little bit from where we've been to the meditative space. And I would like to read from one of my favorite people in the world, Morihei Ueshiba, who founded Aikido. And this is his book, The Art of Peace. So he was an amazing warrior, but turned everything toward peace. So I want to read from him just to transition into the meditation. The art of peace is medicine for a sick world. There is evil and disorder in the world because people have forgotten that all things emanate from one source. Return to that source and leave behind all self-centered thoughts, petty desires, and anger. Those who are possessed by nothing possess everything. Always keep your mind as bright and clear as the vast sky, the great ocean, and the highest peak, empty of all thoughts. Always keep your body filled with light and heat. Fill yourself with the power of wisdom and enlightenment. So filling your body with light and heat is part of training in the martial arts, Qigong yoga, doing something with your body that you're breathing and being out in nature. So for me, those are the things that I always go to. I live with David, so I hear a lot of this stuff.
Whether you want to or not, right?
I was never really into politics, much, and really didn't care for it. Still don't really care for it that much, and I love to stay close to cultivation arts, taking care of oneself and contemplating the more eternal reality. So I balance this with my training. So just to bring that to mind, that those are the ways that we can stay centered and balanced, taking care of ourselves and being in a peaceful place for ourselves, and so that we can spread that around us in these challenging times.
All right.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
So without further ado, let us close our eyes and put both feet flat on the floor. Remembering that simply doing this together, and how many people do we have watching right now? Can you see that?
16,000.
16,000. All right. We're like 3 times higher than we need to be almost. Over double the height that we need to be in the number. So thank you guys for sticking with us and not dropping off. It's not going to be, we'll do 5 or 10 minutes. It's not going to be very long. So I'm sorry if you're getting tired. We're almost done. Follow your breathing. going deeper and deeper into a state of true relaxation. Maybe you breathe faster or slower in through the nose. It doesn't really matter. Just allow yourself to relax. Allow relaxation to take you to a wonderful place where you are at peace. Your mind is at peace. Your body has a warm, soothing, melting, relaxing feeling, moving all through every cell of your body, every tissue. Exhaling peace, inhaling love, patience, forgiveness. You start to notice that this relaxation is very familiar to you. It is that feeling that you have when you are falling in love. That feeling you have when all seems to be so perfect in the moment. The perfect sky, the perfect sunlight, the perfect clouds, the perfect breeze, the perfect smell. All is at peace. You are content, relaxed, confident, happy, and undeterred by the apparent negativity, discord, or suffering that you think might be happening around you. Instead, you are happy. None of those things affect you anymore. And what you have is an abiding knowledge that all is well and all will be well. Recognizing, as you are even more deeply relaxed, that there is an identity to the universe. There is an identity to yourself that is much greater than your conscious mind permits you to see. What if the very awareness that perceives these words, that breathes deeply right now, what if that awareness is connected to the entire universe and all consciousness? What if you can directly access the one infinite creator? What if in these moments of uplifting inspiration, happiness, love, joy, and peace, that your mind is operating much more closely to the original thought that started the universe? What if that thought is love? If all is identity, if all is made of this loving source light, how could there be any lasting evil? How could there be any lasting problems? How could there be anything other than a glorious and triumphant future of peace, prosperity, tranquility, new technology, spiritual activation, genuine compassion, and love? Is it really so hard to believe that we are on the precipice of a grand awakening? You're having it happen as you breathe and you relax more and more, envisioning the earth enveloped in a warm, living, conscious light. All those suffering, we wish them peace. All those who feel lost, who feel hopeless, who do not understand the grand drama that is now playing itself out, the necessary scare event that was foretold, the necessity of the Joan of Arc timeline, where the hero's quest to free humanity from horrible oppression must appear to have been completely lost. For it is only then that we develop the will to actually change. How much better it is when 70% of the electorate sees this for what it is, understands the truth, and we can then proceed with the necessary steps required to liberate planet Earth from centuries of oppression and tyranny. Feeling this happiness, this peace, this overwhelming love that just flows from your body to all others on this planet and many others, resonating with the original thought, accepting the peace of the one infinite creator, accepting the promise that you are not alone, unprotected, unloved. You are loved more than you can possibly imagine. And there are so many beings in alignment with the Logos, the galactic mind, the Christ, who are helpful and dedicated servants, who wish nothing but to see us evolve, to see us become more than we were, to have an ascension experience on a global level, the optimum timeline where we all get to go through this. There's no major earth changes necessary, and the activation occurs peacefully and with everyone able to participate. Is this optimum timeline a fantasy? Or is it actually what we are seeing right now? Could we move through this ascension process, get the technology we need, get the global understanding, the peace, the tranquility? Well, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. But let's hold space for real transformative change on planet Earth. We invoke the coming of a global, loving awareness. We decree that it is our sovereign right and duty as citizens and as members of the human race to live free from oppression and tyranny, to have the tools we need to protect and to defend ourselves, our nations, and our world. And we embrace one another, regardless of our political differences and ideologies, regardless of our nation of origin or our race or our religion. As we start to learn that there really is a one infinite creator, there really is an intelligence that this universe was made from, and understanding why certain individuals wouldn't want you to know about this higher power that protects you, that loves you, maybe even more than you're capable of loving yourself. Just think about the idea that you could be loved more than you've ever been able to love yourself, with a level of honesty, with a level of clarity, with a level of truth. So many loving beings who do not have the same feelings that you might have when you look in the mirror. They're not concerned about the status of your appearance, of your age, they only send you love. They only wish the best for you. They only wish that your planet will be at peace. And that in time, as we go through this collective awakening, that we get to meet our forefathers, our ancestors, our lineages, who have come from other worlds and brought their human genetics to this planet, where it has continued forward, as we will learn in the not-too-distant future. We are not indigenous to this planet. We have brothers and sisters all over the galaxy, and they are all part of the one infinite creator and the Logos that we call Christ. Breathing and allowing this change, allowing the world to be transformed through perfect justice, through a perfect set of military maneuvers that are necessary to ensure that we all will live and breathe, eat and drink in peace. We send our love, guidance, and support to all those who do not see the truth for what it is, who are not able to parse this reality. We hope that their periods of suffering and fear are not long, and we hope that all are able to appreciate themselves and the value of being a human, the value of their votes actually being counted and mattering, the value of having a voice in a representative democratic republic form of government, where all needs are met and all voices are heard. We visualize that world right now, the world where you can barely allow your eyes to close. You have to keep your eyes open because you're so amazed at how much everything is transformed, that the divide and conquer strategy of the elite going back for centuries falls apart. It's okay if somebody has a different political affiliation. It's okay if they have a different religion. It's okay if they have a different gender or a different race or a different nation of origin or a different belief system. With such peace, with such love, with the way we can embrace one another and truly understand that we are not alone, may we all seek to alleviate the authorized burdens that this negative force has given us, that we learn these lessons and we understand that it is only through unity that we achieve lasting global peace. And so it is, for where we go one, we go all. Amen. All right. I want to thank you for participating in this with me. I'm going to end it before midnight Eastern time. So if you've been staying up late, now you can go get some rest. So I'm David Wilcock, and I'm here with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, would you like the last word? You can have it.
Thank you for being here. Stay rooted in your own peace, take care of yourself, and radiate that around you. I think it's the best we can do. So, blessed be. You can say goodbye too.
Oh, I'm going to get the last word?
Yeah, you're going to get the last word.
I'm super excited about this stuff, folks. I trust these briefings. I trust the information and the way I've put it together. There's probably more things to find, but I believe this is a great start. And it looks as if we have had to go through a massive disinformation that was done deliberately to make it look like things were going to go a certain way when they'd already planned on it being different. And we needed that Joan of Arc, all is lost point, the necessary scare event. So I'm David Wilcock, and the next time some really effed up things start happening, I'm going to be right here with you. And if not, then I'm going to be here with you just because I'm bored and I want to talk. And I like to hear myself talk. There you go. I'm out of here. Peace.